Okay, so I've decided as preparation for the Heaven Sent Hell Bent video to see if there's anything I want to add to the question of Clara's overall arc, that I would watch every single episode featuring Jenna Coleman until Face the Raven. This just means I'm watching everything except Twice Upon a Time in order to pretend I'm saving on effort on this entire project. Now, usually in my videos, I try to provide some extra context and help hold the viewer's hand a little and what's going on, and I'm not always great at it, I will admit, but that's sort of the conceit I try to aim for. I also try to make my videos a little polished and not have my script right in front of me, but needs must. I gotta do this just quick and dirty to make this work, hopefully. And the iPad is still going dormant immediately on me. I need to look into that. So with this whole thing, I'm just not even going to try and hold your hand with this at all. This is just me reading aloud from the notes I took while watching these episodes, and I only decided to do this on the second episode, mainly because Asylum of the Daleks isn't really important, even though I did watch it, and I will talk about it in a minute, because the only bit of, and I say that because the only bit of editing I'm doing is going back and adding this introduction so that, you know, this whole thing has an introduction. Because this whole thing, and the other thing to keep in mind is this is a very low effort video. I'm not even going to go back and reread anything, it's just going to be flubs and all. So, we're going to start with the Snowmen, aka Victorian Clara. She's probably the most she's the most well-defined version of Clara, and who probably should have been the companion, but I'm going to say it's because of scripting problems that because you chose to do Asylum of the Daleks at all, and include Clara in that, and she died in that, you sort of have to kill her off in this episode in order to create a mystery for her to go forward and to explain why the first one was there. That was just inevitable. So this is clearly a writing problem that emerged from trying to be clever and then having to do something about it and then going, oh, we got to do a real version of her, but in modern times. I think part of what people find so frustrating about Victorian Clara and how it wasn't her is she represents a type of story we haven't had in the show since Jamie McCrimmon, and that is a companion from our past. And that is just going to be more interesting. There's so many interesting things you can do with that concept, and this chooses to just go, hey, here's this, we did it, it's interesting, we have an interesting companion, and then, no, we're not allowed to have her. It's not really related to the story of Clara, but I'm watching this episode on the second day of Pride, and hearing the line, I'm a lizard woman from the dawn of time, and this is my wife, is honestly really nice. Happy Pride. And now we're going to see the evidence of me just making random notes as this goes. So it's just going to be all over the place. So even Clara here being aggressively flirty and kissing the doctor and then openly saying, I'm going to stare at your ass. I will say it's not great, but I guess feminism is shooting from the other foot. You can see why I like to do extra takes whenever I do these. But I guess feminism is shooting on the other foot for once. I don't think I phrased that well. Anyway, this is a character trait, it's a personality, and it feels flushed out. It's not even just these, you have the bits of her being a barmaid and a governess, and in the governess persona, she's hiding her working class background from the people, even though, being a governess is something of a working class position, presumably. I don't know. I haven't checked history, but the way she's just putting things together during this is just such a well-rounded character, and lots of interesting things about her that you can come back to later. Like this just narratively feels like it was a initial setup for a companion, and then, like I said, the scripting problems sort of force you to kill her off in this. But her getting killed by the frozen governess is conceptually well done. Yeah, we're moving on to the next section here. But the actual, execution of it isn't, them get on paper, getting so caught up and getting to know each other in the TARDIS and seeing everything, and her being different by asking if it's smaller on the outside. It's, it's fun. It's distracting them from the fact that they were being pursued by the ice person, and Clara getting taken and thrown out of the TARDIS and falling to her death conceptually is very tragic. I would say equally tragic to how she ended up dying in Face the Raven, but they actually overdo it in this episode, because there's something about the music and the slow motion in this that doesn't quite feel as much. Like, if you look at Face the Raven, it's a slow upcoming to her death, because in that, Clara knows she's going to die, and the tragedy is the inescapableness of it. Whereas here, the tragedy is sudden and instantaneous, but the actual death, at least you would think so, is done in slow motion and dragged out. It's not consistent. Like, you're being struck by the emotional whiplash, and then the emotional whiplash, instead of lashing, just slows down, in which, no, this should have been quick and tragic. Just her falling and you barely get a chance to take it in. That would make the whole thing consistent, but here it slows down, overdoing it. But then later, she wakes up a little and she's not actually dead yet. And her being able to say goodbye to the Doctor contradicts the ending that you saw with her being pulled and thrown off the TARDIS. While I do like the Doctor giving her a TARDIS key, even though realistically at this point she's not going to go on the TARDIS, the symbolic thing of him moving past his sadness over Amy and Rory's being forced to leave him, I didn't rewatch those episodes, but that's how I'm choosing to frame that. But we're also going to be talking about the Doctor's character when it reflects on Clara only, just because, again, I gotta be somewhat focused on this. So his characterization is equally important to Clara's arc, because his reaction to her death and seeing her die just after he's decided to do things in the universe again, and then he's getting angry enough to go, I'm gonna go save the day so the universe will give me something. And honestly, it does work well in this spot and does set up well for the 12th Doctor's arc. And then later I just wrote down, Clara just can never die, can she? Okay, so the plot of this involves... Okay, so just some quick background. The plot of this involves snow that reflects someone's central emotions. Not really important to the point we're making here, but the snow goes from murdering everyone to becoming literal tears because everyone's crying. But then the Doctor arrives and Clara's actually not dead. So everything's sad enough for people to cry enough for the snow to react to their emotions, but she's not actually dead yet. Like, you would think it would be the dying that causes the crossing over of that, but what do I know? And the only reason why she's not dead is to drop plot, where she says, "Run, you clever boy, and remember," which is the same thing Oswin said in Asylum of the Daleks. And it's frustrating. It feels kind of bad to say this, but she should have just died. It would have made the story better. But at the end, you do see real Clara wandering through a graveyard and finding a grave with her name on it, and it's not mentioned in the next episode. I've seen that one already, and I wrote here, I don't think it's mentioned, but in this it does work, and it doesn't really fit with her character in the next episode, but it's fine. I do like it. It's something to make her interesting. Moving on to the Bells of St. John. The Doctor going into isolation and painting Clara's face. How very heaven sent of him. That's the first note I wrote. So here we see Clara calling the Doctor because of a helpline. We get the great introduction of modern Clara. She needs tech support to get on the Wi-Fi. Clara is a millennial. She should know how to connect to the internet. We'll talk about this later. Okay, so I know I'm not reviewing the episodes, but aside from the inevitable setup for Missy that comes from this tech support call, this introduction is really just so clunky compared to how close the Doctor and Clara become. Tech support was really the best that they could come up with for this introduction, and it's really annoying because in the previous episode, they just happened to bump into each other. it was so much better done. And here, like, I know Missy was, like, trying to set them up together for maximum chaos, but it just, like, even within their meeting, like, why tech support? It's so dumb. And then there's the weird ties with the phrase "run you clever boy and remember." Like, it's meant to link the other Claras, and it's a password for the internet here. And the daughter that Clara's nannying for says it like, oh yeah, it's just the acronym of this random sentence. Where did it come from? It just annoys me. Again, I'm trying not to review these, but every so often something just sneaks through. And then we get weird characterization for the Doctor, where when he first meets real Clara, he comes across as a bit stalkerish. Honestly, I'm amazed that their relationship continues given how it starts. Later, the Doctor rescues her from being uploaded into the network, and that makes sense, given the fact that she's died twice, and it's going to go on to be a running thread of him trying to bring her back to life. So, it does work, and also, he's trying to figure things out. We'll talk, yeah. So, after the Doctor saves Clara from the mind-stealing thing, they're bonding in a scene where the Doctor has set her in her bed to recover, and he's staying outside and reading messages he collected for her. They sort of bond, but the weird problem is the Doctor ends up having more characterization here, because in this scene, Clara isn't a character. She's a plot device. She exists to be a mystery for the Doctor to solve, and all of her characterization here is bent around that. So you sort of get some hints that, like, she's a nanny, but there's not really much else because all she's done is shoo away this creepy man who's shown up and is claiming he's tech support. Also, she called tech support. That's it. That's all she's done so far. And then, again, we get weird characterization with Clara that reduces the stuff we've already had into just plot device stuff. Because the reason why Clara, the millennial, doesn't know about tech support is that in this scene, she knows more about it. So it's evidence of the plot of what the bad guys are doing. So, yeah, she just gets terrible characterization up front. Real Clara does, at least. And then there's a scene where you get reasonable characterization where Clara doesn't want to go into the stranger's box because he's a stranger who's telling her, hey, get in my box. It's like going, hey, get in my car. I promise. Everything will be fine. And it's really just kind of flat, basic, modern woman characterization. So there's just not a ton to her. Then when they do go into the TARDIS, real Clara does not get enough time to enjoy getting to see that the TARDIS is bigger on the inside, which is just, I know technically she got it in the previous episode, but it wasn't this version of this character. I wrote down a side note here. As a side note, there's a shot where you see them entering the TARDIS and then exiting the TARDIS in a different location in what is supposed to be a single continuous shot. At least that's what it's supposed to look like. And I'm very disappointed. This time on viewing it, I could see where the edit was. I could see how they did it. And it's a really good edit, really well done. And it did take this long for me to spot it. So, really well done. So, and then after that, Clara basically disappears for the rest of the plot until at the very end where during this, she does stuff, but she doesn't really have great characterization. She basically just answers the Doctor's questions. And again, it's not until the end where she basically just answers the Doctor's questions and delivers her own backstory of why she's a nanny. And the reason is she was going to go travel, but I think it was a friend she stayed with for a week, and then the friend died, so she's watching the kids to make up for that. It reads weird to me. Like, Victorian Clara had, Like, you didn't have answers, but you had great setup, and here the answers are weird. It's so weird. Because, like, if you think about that for a minute, I don't know anyone who would do that. Like, they would help a little, but not move in permanently. Like, that's going to be a thing for the husband and his family, and also the woman's family to help. Why does the random friend who happened to be living there have to step in? I don't know. Anyway, as you can tell, this section's a lot shorter because Clara's just... her actual introduction, she's not in it as much, which is bizarre. Also, at the end, when the doctor's asking her to... when the doctor asks her to, come travel with him, and he can even, come pick her up and then come back later. Like, it's odd. And then, but her answer is, by odd, I mean, I don't know, I wrote it down, I'll get to it in a sec. But her answer of, ask me tomorrow, it feels like the script is just trying to be mysterious for the sake of being mysterious. But I'll also say, like, her wanting to stay with the family and then traveling with the doctor on the side, like, I don't like it. It is different, so the differentness of it, of a companion doing that, is its own kind of interesting. I just personally really don't like it. I don't see the point of it. It technically did start with Amy and Rory, so it's not actually original here, but again, I'd rather someone just actually travel. This whole conceit of a companion traveling with the doctor part-time just forces weird stuff into the episodes, because the doctor, you now need, at the beginning and end, for little beats of picking up and dropping off, rather than letting the story be itself. And especially at this point in the modern series, the stories are already struggling for room, so it just forces the stories into even smaller time. And there's not as much room for plot and character is sort of the important thing here. So, yeah, Victorian Clara is still really good. No, not a ton of answers, but interesting setups, and then actual Clara doesn't really have those. Like, they try to create some mystery with the leaf, but even then, the eventual answers we'll get, I don't think are as interesting. So anyway, that's the bit here. I need to go collect trash and then go to bed. So, I'll watch the other episodes at some point. Okay, I've been watching a few more of the Clara stories, so let's film another batch of my notes here. Let's start with... the Rings of Akhaten. Before we get into this next block, I want to just say explicitly, I honestly can't remember, and I can't be bothered to check the first filming I did of this, that these are not reviews of the episodes. These are just running commentaries on Clara's character in each of the episodes. So, in this, I'm going to be assuming you have some familiarity with the episodes I'm talking about, and I'm going to be talking about this as if you have just watched the episodes, because I have. So this starts with a really good subtle thing with the Doctor wearing Amy's glasses. Very nice, good note on his character at this point. But the plot in this, where Clara's parents met because a leaf fell on a guy's face and he nearly got run over by a car, can it be said that I think... Does it feel like I think romance is dead if I call this whole plot stupid? I think part of the fact is that both of Clara's parents throughout this scene are just never not smiling, which just makes the entire thing feel inauthentic. And it makes it feel like it was written from the story of the leaf being important and working backwards from that. I mean, the explanation Clara's dad gives for why the leaf is important sort of makes sense. but it doesn't feel like what a normal person would do, and that the big key with this is that it needs to feel authentic, and this is painfully artificial. Also, the Doctor is vaguely creepy in this, by just him popping up throughout Clara's life and her childhood. Jumping ahead, okay, I was wrong. The only time they aren't smiling is when Clara's mom dies, and then they're the saddest people to ever sad. I feel like I would have more sympathy for this, except Clara's parents aren't characters. Also, I backed it up a little to double check one bit with the Doctor, but Clara holding 101 Places, the 101 Places book, the book that holds the leaf that's really important, while she's crying at her mother's grave, while she looks close in age. And I think she's with her dad. I could be wrong, but she's way too close in age to him. Anyway, I'm not going to double check if it is actually her dad, because I just don't care. But Clara holding that book while crying into it at a memorial for her mother, again, feels inauthentic. And like it's here just to justify the mystery that was set up in the previous episode. By the way, if you thought that previous paragraph read was awkward, I'm not doubling back and redoing this again. This is going to be my worst video ever. But then we get one more scene with the Doctor as he's reiterating... I just said I'm not backing up. Then we get one more scene with the Doctor as he's reiterating the mystery that Clara is impossible because of her first two appearances, which is just so boring as a narrative thing. But then Clara goes into the TARDIS to travel in it, and finally she's not set up on the best foot because she says that she doesn't know where she wants to go. It's not a bad thing in general, but it's just not setting her up for success as a character, especially when so much has been poured on her, especially just in this episode in the pre-title sequence. But I will say her final conclusion of, I want to go see something awesome, is good. I like it. The Doctor's introduction to Clara amongst all the aliens on... How do I say that? Akhaten. Sorry, text-to-speech is terrible on this. It honestly feels like in line with Rose's... Her introduction to the aliens, rather, feels in line with... to Rose's introduction to aliens in the episode End of the World. But it actually is a little better here, where, like here, instead of the Doctor just completely leaving her to fend for herself, he's taking her along and introducing her to everything. And it's not as... in a world that isn't quite as formal and ritualistic as what it was with the End of the World. Here you have a marketplace with lots of aliens. I really like it. Clara is just meeting with a random little girl. This is good character introduction stuff. And she just goes to make sure the girl's okay. It's a good way to introduce her to and exploring things and making it human and normal by showing her to have a basic, understandable desire to keep everyone okay. Also, I love that her instinct is to take the girl back to the TARDIS. It's a really good first thought for her, especially in her first exploration into the universe. But the TARDIS not liking Clara, which starts in this episode, it's an odd arc. I had forgotten about this arc in here, but it's weird. But an interesting conclusion to this initial arc of the story is Clara talking to the little girl has convinced the girl to go back to what she was going to do. But Clara provided comfort. I don't know, it just seems odd that a little girl's scared of what the big world is going to have her do, which could involve a sacrifice, is, yes, go back. It's just an odd conclusion to it. Clara in this demonstrates she's early on in her character arc, giving lots of room for her to grow from here, considering that in this there's the old god who has woken up. The actual old god, I've jumped quite ahead in the story here, which is not the old dude in the box. There was a lot going on with this story. Anyway, the giant star has woken up, and Clara just turns to the doctor and goes, "What do we do now?" And then the doctor says, "Run," and then there's a conversation that I don't know how this became a TikTok sound, but when I heard that on TikTok, I just thought, that's an interesting episode to pull from. TikTok, you surprise me all the time. That was my actual reaction back when that was trending a few years ago. What? This initial part is an incredible counter to the rest of Clara's arc, because she takes the bike that they had gotten to go back to the main planet, and then she's basically doing nothing for a long time until she decides to fly back and fix the plot herself. Is this technically the start to her big arc? Maybe. I'll just say the fact that she and the Doctor are once again trying to make this leaf out to be really special, to me, it's just a step too far in terms of seriousness, which makes it hard to be believable, but I will say her pointing out that the leaf represents possibility, loss, and a future that could exist is technically interesting, but the execution of it, again, just feels off. And one of the things that is important that I try to talk about in some stuff, or at least try to think about when I'm reviewing stuff, is it has to feel authentic. The second what you're watching doesn't feel authentic and it becomes artificial, it just doesn't work. And with something like this, which is, this is a main part of characterization Clara is getting here, and that's really important for it to be authentic. But then Clara realizes the Doctor has been following her, and was there at her mother's grave. And the Doctor gives away part of the mystery by just saying that she reminds him of someone. That's his explanation for why he stalked her. Okay, so that's on to Cold War. Again, not reviews, but I feel like David Warner was wasted in this. I wrote that before I watched the episode, and after the episode, yes, he was wasted in this. The Doctor and Clara just get dropped into this, and so there's not much to talk about in terms of her character here. It's just really not an ideal thing to see, but then the Ice Warrior shows up and we start to get her, to see her standing up for herself. So that's technically a character here, but it feels a bit basic. So then the group is deciding who to send in to talk to the Ice Warrior, and for some reason they want someone non-Russian and non-alien, so Clara volunteers. I know I'm growing bored here. This is what I wrote. I know I'm growing bored here because there's nothing about Clara to talk about in this, but then the Doctor's just telling her everything to say, so I don't even see the point in having her be the one to talk to the Ice Warrior. It doesn't engage her as a character. Let me rephrase that better. So the group is deciding who to send in to talk to the Ice Warrior, and for some reason they want someone non-Russian and non-alien to do it, so Clara ends up volunteering. But I don't even really see the point in that, because throughout that, Clara is clearly just repeating what the Doctor tells her through an earpiece, which it might as well have been the Doctor doing this. I don't get it. I don't know. It's setting her... I guess it's setting her up to be a passive character and become a more active character, but I wrote down another thing later. We'll see. Oh, I wrote it down right next. This feels like a script that was written before they knew who the new companion was going to be, so the companion was written to be as generic as possible and feature her as little as possible, and then they never went back and filled in a character. Yeah. And then a little bit later we get what can be described as technically a bit of character, which is just Clara learning the rules of time travel, where she goes, obviously we're going to be fine, because the world didn't end back now, where we are. And the Doctor says, well, we're here, we're changing things, yes, the world could end. But then later we get, honestly, probably my favorite scene in the whole thing, Clara's conversation with David Warner, where he's asking about the future and she's trying to, say, I can't say anything. And he just goes, I just want to know if the music group I like splits up. It is the most interesting scene in the whole thing. Something I feel like is going to become clear as I continue, this section of episode throughout this, part of the video is that I don't like Series 7. It feels like this was just the last victim of Stephen Moffat spreading himself with the Tintin movie and Sherlock. And you can tell how I like the series based on the fact that I'm watching the episode as I write this note, and everything is so boring, I'd rather talk about why I don't like Series 7. I actually wrote that while the episode was just going. And Clara then does something at the end of the episode where she tries to talk down the Ice Warrior by saying, remember that conversation we had earlier? It was the only thing that wasn't the Doctor just telling her what to say. And it was saying, remember these things, like your daughter and stuff. And it doesn't really even matter. The downside to this is it doesn't matter if Clara was successful in this, because the other Ice Warriors arrive and fix everything. It's all good now. But I do like Clara's instinct to try and do something here. Again, this whole episode, she felt incredibly generic. And I would almost bet money that this was written without knowing what the companion's name even was. On to the episode Hide. So we technically get some character for Clara, where she doesn't want to be assumed. She wants to go see... What did I write? Okay, so we technically get a character bit for Clara, where she doesn't want everything to just be assumed. She wants to go see ghosts, and that requires the Doctor to say, I dare you, to get her to go. I think this era of the show is really suffering from only caring about Clara to the extent that she is a mystery. Yeah, they're just having her do vaguely odd, mysterious things because, oh, she's a mystery. Anyway, this is sort of continuing the plot by her asking questions, doing the thing I know I've never actually... Anyway, this week's, the episode here is just continuing the plot by asking questions. What did I write here? This is, what? I don't read these before I make these segments, obviously. I probably should, but, yeah, this is what it is. Basically, the point I'm making in this part of my notes is, I've never actually watched Doctor Who specifically trying to focus on the character development of a single character, but it does make it interesting, and it's one of the things is you notice just how often the attention has to go to other characters for the story to happen, and that necessarily makes the character you're focusing on fall into the background a little bit. We then get what I guess could be considered facts about Clara, but it's injected by a joke, because Clara is talking with the other woman character's name I don't remember right now, about how where she says that whiskey is the 11th most disgusting thing invented. And the only reason why she says it's the 11th worst is because she's traveling with the 11th Doctor. This reference was done much better in Real Clara's first episode, where she is talking about a book saying that Chapter 11 is the saddest. But I don't get why you did that joke twice. Anyway, I don't know. This bit here was just kind of pointless. I was stretching for anything to say about her. And then we get, again, more slightly odd character development, where Clara is reading into the relationship of the two main guest characters, where they are in love, apparently, but they're not actually knowing it. So I guess she cares about romances. I'm so desperate for anything. We then get something interesting where the girl guest character I mentioned earlier tells Clara to not trust the Doctor because, quote, there's a sliver of ice in him. But there's no time for following up on this immediately. And when Clara's talking with the Doctor, he's incredibly dismissive of Clara, saying that the TARDIS doesn't like her. Which, it doesn't. It's stupid, but it doesn't. But then, again, the Doctor is sometimes just really characterized weird in his relationship to Clara during this time, where where the Doctor blames Clara for getting the TARDIS angry with her because Clara is drying off her umbrella in the TARDIS, which I feel like others have done. Even the Doctor would have done it, but apparently it's a problem now. It's weird. We then get a follow-up on the comment made about the sliver of ice in the Doctor, with her being awed and horrified at the prospect of the Doctor, who has just traveled the Earth's entire lifetime from creation to end, and she's just like, oh my god. And the Doctor's like, oh yeah, it's all good. Clara's way of putting the Doctor's perspective on people by her saying, we're all ghosts to you, is honestly really good. It's a good kind of grappling with the broad nature of the Doctor, especially as shown in the 11th Doctor's time. Then at the end, Clara gets to do something where, again, she's desperate to get the portal that's open to another universe, a pocket universe, to save the Doctor, because yes, the girl who opened the portal did a lot. They definitely still need to rescue the Doctor. We then get a bit of the TARDIS saying Clara's a narcissist. Again, the TARDIS's relationship with Clara is just, it's weird. I don't... It's such a weird thing. Like, technically it's interesting because it's new, I guess, but I don't like it. The TARDIS basically says Clara's a narcissist with, like, this is not set up at all. Like, this is just the cheapest form of character development by just saying things about a character and insisting it's true. And the TARDIS... So the way the TARDIS says this is it creates a hologram of a person that Clara respects the most, and it's just a hologram of Clara. Yeah, the TARDIS makes her talk to herself. It's weird. But this whole sequence is pointless because the TARDIS just lets her in and she manages to fly into the pocket universe anyway. This whole scene was just padding. Like, the thing is, this is the only characterization that she really gets in this whole sequence outside of, just generic companion help Doctor. But it's just padding. But then, again, the Doctor gets some, again, kind of creepy characterization because we find out the only reason that she and he even came to this place was the 11th Doctor's manipulative side coming out, and that he's talking to the woman who is an actual psychic, as shown throughout the episode, and he asks her what's the deal with Clara, only to be told she's just a regular girl. What's up with you, man? Which, yeah. Alright, next up, Journey to the Center of the TARDIS. I've watched a lot of episodes in run-up to making this. I'm just going to do this from now on. It's just block viewing a bunch and then reading them all at once. So now we see the Doctor trying to get... Clara and the TARDIS okay with each other. And she's just referring to the TARDIS as a machine, which I'll say it's not a great way to get the sentient machine okay with you, is to call it a machine. And here she's denying that the TARDIS dislikes her, when in the previous episode it literally called her a narcissist. So, yeah. And this is another episode where Clara is just a plot device, and she's just trapped somewhere deep in the TARDIS because the explosion happened, and now the Doctor has to go pursuing for her and recruits other people for finding her. She's literally just the pursuit of the Doctor. We then get our first instance of the Doctor recklessly caring for Clara to the, how to put this best, he overdoes it. It sort of made sense in the 12th Doctor's time during Face the Raven, because they've been traveling together for a while in that episode, but here it doesn't feel like it's working because they've essentially only really started traveling together. And so him threatening to kill random people, but if they don't help him find Clara, is a bit over the top. But then, partway through the episode, Clara has made her way back to the console room without any help from the Doctor, so I guess technically that's good negative characterization for the Doctor by him doing all that when she could just make her way back. But in that, she also thanks the TARDIS for helping her. So, I guess good on improving your relationship with the TARDIS. After the Doctor rescues Clara out of the echo of the console room, it's not actually the console room, doesn't matter. It's not important. We get a bit where we see Clara in the background of the scene, where she's not actually really talking in this scene, but we see her in the back clearly just coping with the threat on her life that was there right before the Doctor rescued her. And it really works well. It's good setup for her calming herself and then going, okay, I'm going to dive back into this. It's set up for that stuff that I mentioned in the Face the Raven review, where she just goes from, anxious, 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 calm. We then do get some hints of Clara not letting the Doctor get away with stuff, like the bit where they're being pursued by the monster, which the Doctor knows what it is, and he slips on something with it, and she calls him out on it, and he is dismissive of her concerns. And it's a potential future version of Clara who has essentially burned. Now, something else in the episode, again, not reviews, but a comment just making about the episode as a whole. I want to say that the whole plot thread of the two people who are treating the third person, who is a human, but telling him he's a robot when he's not, it feels like it's supposed to be a parallel to the Doctor treating Clara as a plot device, but I honestly can't say for certain, and this isn't a review of that, so moving on. We then get just a hint, at actual honest-to-God progress with the Impossible Girl arc, with the Doctor then telling Clara that she's died before. Unfortunately, this entire episode undoes itself so it doesn't matter, and doesn't have consequences here. And then the episode ends with the Doctor coming to the conclusion that Clara is just a regular random girl. Congratulations. Again, the episode undoes itself. Alright, last one for this block. The Crimson Horror. Just a random comment about this episode. I'm amazed this one was turned into a book. There are so few of the modern series that got turned into books. I'm not sure why this one did. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the Doctor and Clara... the Doctor and Clara are missing for about the first third to half of this story, so there's not really a ton to talk about with her arc in this one. This episode straight up just doesn't feature Clara that much, mainly because they don't want Clara to meet with the Paternoster gang, but she's there in the flashbacks with the Doctor when they arrive, and at the very end, the Paternoster... And it's also so that the Paternoster gang can question, wait, isn't Clara dead? I really don't want to imply that Clara basically does nothing in these episodes. Like, she has good rapport with the Doctor and good banter, but it's just not really anything that is a great character arc. I kind of mentioned this during the Hyde segment, but... yeah, sometimes the story is just actually a story and not a flowing character arc. But I'm watching them all just to be sure and spot anything I can. And, alright, I'm going to rearrange these slightly. Speaking of that, we do get hints at things that do come up later. Tiny little nuggets of bits that do become growth. Like, we get a hint at Clara's bossiness that Missy talks about with her, and it's here where she has a very positive reaction to the Doctor telling her she's the boss. Which is a good bit of characterization wrapped in banter that happens. It's honestly good character development for her. But then, right at the end of the episode, we basically find out that the Doctor was trying to take Clara to London. And I'm realizing that it's because that's where Victorian Clara's from. So again, he's still manipulating. The previous episode where he realizes she's just a regular girl, which, again, is sort of undone by the way the episode ends. So, of course, he's still going to do it like he did in Hyde. Also, Clara's need to be the bossiness. This is why I shouldn't rearrange these when reading this. We get an echo of that bit right at the end when Clara is playing back at her house where the kids are, and she plays with the toy for a second going, "I am the boss." Again, just a nice little clever bit. But then the actual ending technically ties into Clara's arc, with the kid she babysits for figuring out that she's time traveling by finding the pictures of everything she's done, including the Victorian Clara, which she jumps out and goes, "Wait, that didn't happen." And it's sort of aimed at her figuring out her arc, which it's just kind of stupid to keep the information from her. Like, it's just, when it comes to this arc, it just makes the whole thing feel tedious, because the arc isn't really an arc. It's a fact that's just being withheld. I'll probably talk about this more when I eventually get to talking through Series 9 with the hybrid thing. But the arc isn't really an arc. It's just a fact that's being withheld for a long time for seemingly no reason. But yeah, it just makes this whole, I guess you could call it an arc, tedious. And now we move to Nightmare in Silver. I wish this was still the worst thing that I associated Neil Gaiman with. We're not actually going to talk about that aspect of this, though, but just want to say that from the top. In an ideal world, this story would be showing us how Clara interacts with the children that she nannies. But she basically has just one line in the cold open where they see a Cyberman and the Doctor freaks out. Throughout this whole sequence, Clara's mostly just standing in the background. Then afterwards, when everything's fine, she basically just takes pictures of the kids bouncing on the fake moon like a disinterested mother. And again, in an ideal world, this would be actual characterization of her. But it doesn't even feel like that. It's just, Clara's just there. And the girl that Clara watches declares Clara to be boring because she's bored and she's looking to the civilians of the planet that they're on for help. And it's sort of inadvertent characterization for Clara that just reiterates Clara's a bad nanny. And then upon realizing that the kid has gotten out and is doing stuff, Clara just yells at the kid, and the kid immediately claps back, "You always do this to me," or something like that. Again, Clara's just really bad at her job that she stumbled into. This whole arc of Clara being a bad nanny, it does annoy me, because she goes on to become a teacher in the future, just a few episodes from now, and the Victorian Clara we met at the beginning in the Snowmen was a good nanny, and I have no idea where that came from. Now, onto the actual plot of this, the Doctor does trust Clara to take over everything and help keep the people who are living on the planet from blowing up the planet. So I guess that's a good sign of trust, and that they've gotten close enough for the Doctor to be able to just tell her to do that, and then he is assured that that will happen. So that is a level of closeness they have at this point, but it's the implication of characterization, not necessarily showing it. And then, what I wrote here, Clara's characterization is basically just stop people from blowing on the planet while they're still on it, at least. And this whole sequence, I feel like is supposed to be comedic, but it mostly just comes across as stupid. Like, these people are going, yeah, no, we're just going to blow up the planet while we're still on it. That's the mission now. But then when Clara is talking with the Doctor, aka Mr. Clever, in this sequence, when the Doctor's like half possessed by the cyber planner, it is an amazing performance by Matt Smith, but Clara learns about the impossible girl thing, and then she's just okay with it. And mainly because the Doctor says, oh, we'll get to that later, and then the rest of the episode just happens, so that's the only thing that contributes to it. And it just, again, it's just weird to have her be characterized as going, oh wait, there's something about me that you call impossible that you've been keeping from me this entire time we've been traveling together. We've grown close enough that you trust me to be able to keep these people from blowing up the planet, and you can't tell me about this? And she's just fine with it. Then there's a sequence with Mr. Clever that plays interestingly, given how the Doctor and Clara's relationship goes, in comparison to how it goes with the 12th Doctor especially. Here there's a bit where Mr. Clever is pretending to be the Doctor and is being extra lovey-dovey with Clara, which, like I said, with the 12th Doctor, they do become slightly more, it is a little gross, like 50-something to 20 to 30-something that Clara is. Well, yeah, we're just going to skip past that because we have to. But the thing with Mr. Clever is Clara knows that it's Mr. Clever because he's flirting with her, but eventually they do. I guess they've grown closer, so that works. Then at the end of the episode, you get the King character, whom I don't think Clara interacted with a ton, proposing marriage to her. It really comes out of nowhere, but I'm talking about it here because I guess it's technically something for Clara, because she gets proposed to. It's so random. But then I keep bringing up Mr. Clever flirting with Clara because, well, it's kind of important in this, because at the very end of the episode, when the Doctor is alone in the TARDIS, we get an incredibly weird line that contradicts what we heard earlier, where the Doctor, like I said earlier, the Doctor said he wasn't attracted to Clara, but then at the end, he's talking about how Clara's in a skirt just a tad too small. I don't know if that was Moffat or Gaiman. I feel like this one probably was Moffat, and it was him adding stuff to tease to connect to the arc, but I really don't want to dig into this too much. It's just... Anyway, on to the name of the Doctor. The cold open at the very... Oh, sorry. Sometimes I phrase stuff here weird. So we cold open with something that takes place at the very end of the episode, where we hear Clara narrating that she was born to save the Doctor. It's a fun way to reduce the character down to just a singular purpose, but we'll talk about that more later. We then get to the actual start of the story with Clara, and we get a hint at a different Clara from earlier, where real Clara is trying to make a souffle, which is what Asylum Clara did. Or rather, Oswin. Sorry, I got her confused with Osgood for a second. I just realized they did too many names too similar here. I'm glad they don't talk about Oswin too much after real Clara's first appearance. Anyway, Clara goes to a telepathic conference with Vastra, Jenny, Strax, and River, and it's mostly just her asking questions and being a little confused on stuff, which is fine. But then she sees Jenny get stabbed, and they learn about Trenzalore. That's the main takeaway from all this for what comes next. Again, not a review, but just enough that this whole thing is going to make sense. The Clara... why do I keep saying the Clara when I mean the Doctor? This is the hybrid arc all over again. Anyway, the Doctor is able to figure out that Trenzalore is his grave, and his entire attitude towards that is simply perfect. The Doctor recognizes that Jenny, Strax, and Vastra are the people who helped him when he was at his worst, when he basically quit the universe and quit being the Doctor, and he has to save them because of what they did for him. It's honestly really great characterization for him, and it doesn't feel like it's necessarily an obligation thing. It's just him going, these people were here for me, and I care about them because they care about me. It's not a transactional thing. It's a, friendship community thing. As the Doctor and Clara are making their way through the ruins of the giant TARDIS, that is, the Doctor's tomb, Clara gets memories from Journey to the Center of the TARDIS, where she learned that she died twice, and it should be impossible. She honestly should just be allowed to know this, but it's she should have been told this before now, which again was hinted at in the previous episode. But it is treated as... it's inconvenient things to know at this point, rather than an actual growth for the character. And here's exactly what I wrote. Again, this is not reviews of this episode, but I hesitate to not comment on this because I don't know when the next time I'm going to have watched the entire... this isn't even about Clara. This is about something else. I don't know when I'll next have watched the entire Impossible Girl arc, but... Simeon's plan, aka the Great Intelligence's plan, it is an effective plan. If you really hate the Doctor, killing him at every single moment is an entire timeline, is an effective strategy that will get the job done really well. But I'm honestly not convinced that compared to all of the Doctor's other villains, that he has necessarily earned that kind of victory. I could see the Daleks, or at least... the Daleks do this, but the intelligence said that he forwarded him that the Doctor thwarted him at every moment, and as far as I can tell, based on how the Great Intelligence is portrayed here, he's only faced the Doctor twice before this. There were those 2 second Doctor stories, but based on the events of this story, I think it's supposed to be implied that those appearances were as a result of what happens in this episode. I could be wrong, but that's what I feel like this is going for. So, I'm not sure that this character, like I said, who's only had 2 appearances before this, is necessarily the one who should be doing this kind of plan, although it is a really good plan. So the only conclusion I can come to is, this guy's just really lucky for stumbling upon the grave. Or, I guess he's somehow more determined and vengeful than the Daleks. Okay, time for the big one. Let's talk about the ending. The way Clara decides to sacrifice herself in the end to save the Doctor. I'm not sure narratively it's completely justified. Clara has been somewhat of an empty character up until now. Basically, she's just existed as her mystery and been kind of an empty stock character that they've just barely filled her in other episodes. That's at least how it has felt to me. But in the way that this plot is specifically written and performed in this episode, it does make it feel justified somewhat, because Clara is able to recognize the impact that the Doctor has, and recognizes that what's the Great Intelligence has done needs to be undone, and that the Doctor has clearly seen the effects of her doing this. Rather than feeling trapped, she is rather than feeling trapped into inevitability that she has to do this, she feels reassured that she will succeed in this. This type of foreknowledge would be something that in another story would be a curse. Clara isn't necessarily going to be allowed to escape and wouldn't necessarily want to do this in another story, I think. But Clara is choosing to do this for the Doctor's benefit, and it does come across as a personal choice. And I like that they said that the knowledge that she's already done it is encouragement that it will all work out. That is the way it's at least portrayed here. And the Doctor and River both telling her this is a bad idea and will only lead to her destruction does make it more clear that this is a personal choice she is making. Although this is getting very close to, like, if this had actually been the end of Clara's arc, if she had truly perished in this, it would have left a really bad taste in my mouth for her character. Especially given that, again, in the earlier episodes, she was kind of an empty stock character waiting to be filled in, because Series 7 is a little bit of a mess for me. It does make the fact that she survives at this work well for me, because it could have been a really bad ending. It's not an actual complete sacrifice that, like, because the Doctor can save her through nonsense at the end, I'm willing to look past the great intelligence not escaping, but yeah, the whole thing is just weird. I'm not sure I phrased that all well, but yeah, it's one of those things. If the plot gets really close to being a bit bad for me, now that I think about it, and I've written more stuff here, so anyway, I also do like that her last words before she jumps into the time stream are, "Run, you clever boy, and remember me." It does work here. It makes the earlier clunkiness of it I forget what her first episode proper is, but it's not the Snowmen, it's the one after. But I've sort of been hinting at this through the previous section of this, but my careful analysis of Clara's agency and choice here, I feel like it could be obvious, but I'm going to say it explicitly. I am filming this on Sunday. I wrote this down yesterday. Timing's a pain. Doesn't matter. But this previous Wednesday, I saw the movie Obsession, and I feel like that's somewhat obvious. By the way, if you haven't seen Obsession, by the time this comes out, I'm sure it might be out on streaming. Go watch it. It's not an easy watch, but it is good. Go watch it. It's good. But back to relevance for this episode. The idea of a character, narratively, like the structure of the story, is forcing her to give up her life for another person. Back in 2013, when this came out, it was a little squicky. But like I said, I just watched Obsession. It's really squicky after that. I don't know what to say. It's a little uncomfortable to think about. But back to the actual characterization within the episode. We end with Clara sort of landing at, I don't know, like a land that represents the abstract concept of the Doctor's life. And we see the leaf from earlier show up. And I still maintain that the leaf is stupid. But the leaf coming back right now does work. It's a great way to ground Clara and center her so that the Doctor can get her. Also, again, because I can't not review bits of the episode, I do like the very end of this and how they revealed the War Doctor. It is kind of narratively hilarious that Clara never saw the War Doctor and through all of this. Like, apparently, this implies that the Great Intelligence took one look at the War Doctor's life and said, you know what, that life's bad enough as is. I'll just let him exist. No need to murder him every mission in that one. That's fine. So Clara never needed to follow up with that. The reveal also does make the narrative where the Doctor is somehow able to get both himself and Clara out of his time stream and they don't die. Like, it effectively covers up that problem because who cares? That's a new Doctor and it's John Hurt. Okay, now on to the 50th anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor. Based on the emphasis that was given on Clara's guilt leading her to become a permanent nanny for her friends' kids, and her wanting to go out and be an explorer, actually, the pivot in this episode to her all of a sudden being a teacher is really strange. Like, you have to go to a school and get a license to be a teacher, at least in America. I have no idea if that's how it works in the UK. I would hope there's some minimum training requirements, but I'm not researching that, especially for this low-effort video. But her being one of the first things in the episode, and she's just automatically a teacher from the start, with no reference to the kid she was nannying that she, like I said, gave up her travels for, I'm pretty sure, we'll see as I continue through this, but I don't think those kids are ever mentioned again. Which, again, it's just really weird when they were the focus of the story just 2 episodes ago. We then see Clara, after learning where the Doctor is, riding a motorcycle into the TARDIS. This is basically the only vestige of her everyday life adventurous spirit that we saw from earlier, as in earlier in Series 7. But I'm pretty sure we never see that motorcycle again, so yeah, that's fine. And then there's a bit that really annoyed me this time while watching the episode, and that is Clara being allowed to snap her fingers to close the TARDIS doors. Because, in Series 7, she and the TARDIS went through a thing where they didn't like each other. And now the TARDIS is doing this, and part of me wants to think that the reason the TARDIS is doing that, and is letting Clara close the doors, is because Clara went through the Doctor's entire timeline, and so now Clara has only technically been with the Doctor throughout, has been through with the TARDIS as much as the Doctor has, which puts her on roughly equal footing it's in roughly equal footing with the Doctor. Which I'm not a huge fan of. But combining this fact of Clara completely redefining her relationship with the TARDIS and being a teacher and not really caring about the kids that she, like I said earlier, gave up a good chunk of her life for, my instinct is that Clara has essentially been rewritten as a brand new character here, with just a few vestiges of the original character that we saw in Series 7, whom, yes, wasn't super well defined, but did have some definition to her. We then see what is the start of Clara's recklessness as the TARDIS is being flown in by UNIT and the Doctor is hanging from the bottom of the TARDIS, and we see Clara just hanging out by the open door as the TARDIS descends. I would maintain this is not as insane as what we saw in Face the Raven, but it is still very reckless of her. As Clara and the Doctor and Kate and Osgood are entering the archive to see the painting, we then see something that is again contradictory to what we had established just earlier in this episode, and sort of points out that the problems that come with having a companion that has experienced all of the Doctor's life, and how it isn't necessarily a good thing to have a character like that, because we see Clara asking the Doctor what UNIT is. And this is right after I just noted down, there's stuff like her relationship with the TARDIS that only really works because Clara just experienced all of the Doctor's life. So, I'm just gonna ask, how could Clara have experienced all of the Doctor's life and need to ask what unit is and have spent any time with the Third Doctor? Like, this episode is trying to play it two ways with Clara, where she didn't experience, or at least was split out amongst everything. Possibly was just so overwhelming she can't retain the information. That is kind of technically how they play it, like with other characters like me or Rory, and where both of them have sort of lived through everything, but they can't retain everything because they just have human memories that can only tap into it occasionally. Here it's not said explicitly that's what's happening with Clara, at least at this point. I think they do sort of allude to that much later in the episode. But it comes across as weird, at least to me, when the whole Clara and the TARDIS's rivalry is seemingly completely reversed to being a positive relationship because Clara experienced everything, and then you have her asking, what's unit? And I know this was done just because the companion is there to ask questions, and this is the 50th anniversary special where not everyone is necessarily going to know what unit is, so we need to explain that, and she was the only character to do that. But you have to have set up a character to where it makes sense for her to ask it. Okay, jumping ahead in the episode, when Kate takes Clara to the Dark Archive and reveals that Clara has been there before and had her memory wiped, Clara is real casual about it, which I don't know what that says about Clara as a character, but it is notable. I do like her response to finding out that the cake... What? Oh, sometimes text-to-speech is really bad. Clara's response to finding out that the Kate Stewart that she's been traveling with is actually a Zygon, and she's just, okay, I guess I'm using this other form of time travel now, and I'm gonna do it with a big smile on my face. Which, again, is sort of a hint towards where she goes. So, I am glad that it was introduced in the 11th Doctor's time period, because, again, she's just having fun here, which... like I said in Face the Raven, was sort of her ultimate downfall. Clara then meets up with the three doctors who are trapped in the cell in the tower, and she says that she remembers the others a little bit, which is the closest that we're going to get to her saying that she has experiences from all of the other... hers meeting all of the other doctors. Now, that type of memory thing is probably the best way to go about this. I just wish this information had been presented in a better order. I do recognize there's not really a good way to do that. It's just the frustrations of me hyper-focusing on Clara as a character and spotting this. Clara then, after the negotiations have started between the Zygons and the humans, goes over to talk to the War Doctor, who has sat himself alone, and then... okay, we're gonna divert, because, as I was watching this, I realized, oh, that's the shot of Clara that's used in all the fan material and all the promotional material, and it felt almost like I was watching a Matt Pat situation, except instead of it being, digitally cut out... this image has just been used so much in everything that I was shocked it was actually used in the show for some reason. I don't know. Is that the Matt Pat effect? I could be wrong. Anyway, Clara and the War Doctor's conversation is brief but nice. It shows how well she knows and understands the Doctor and she's able to connect with the War Doctor in this moment, even if ultimately he rejects her urging for him to not end the Time War the way that we as viewers had thought he ended the Time War. Clara's encouragement when all of the doctors are together and almost about to do it is nice. It knows how she understands the Doctor... sorry, I reread that. Oh, the fun things of trying to read this. Anyway, Clara's encouragement to all of them together to not do this, but instead find an alternate solution, works really well in this moment. It's the complete refusal to let a bad thing happen just because it's for a good reason is great. Clara works really well here. Now, I have said that the decision to bring Jenna Coleman in early and do a teaser to set her up her storyline was not that great. And I would argue, as I said in the previous segment, that it has aged badly in some ways. But the decision to have the 12th Doctor cameo in this sequence, it's not bad. It does work. It's mainly because he's not actually doing anything. It's just a couple shots of his hand and his eyes. Then in the aftermath, we see the War Doctor and Clara sitting together, drinking tea and chatting, while the other two doctors are hanging out, which again solidifies their bond and makes the next moment work really well. And it needed to, because as I wrote here, when I started this episode, I thought that the War Doctor's comment about hoping to someday be half the man Clara is would feel off, and it still does a little bit, but it's more justified than I thought it was. Clara's not as important to the story as the other elements, but she does have her moments, and I've talked about them, but it's much more about the 11th Doctor and the War Doctor, with the 10th Doctor just being important on the virtue of him being a doctor. To the narrative that's being told, he's not as central. He does have moments that contribute to it, but 11 and War get the majority of the focus, as they should. But I do love the 10th Doctor being here, but yeah, this whole line about the Doctor wanting to be half the man Clara is only a little off, mainly because, like I said, she's been a bit empty as a character with a few defining traits, but it's not many. I shouldn't be this deep into her as a companion and be feeling like she's just been completely rewritten, is all. Like, I can't be the only one who thinks that's not a good thing, right? The time of the Doctor. Covering for her family by having a boyfriend, by getting the Doctor to fake it, is honestly really charming and works really well for Clara to do here. And the Doctor is just immediately like, yes, let's do it. And it's just his childlike wonder and innocence that genuinely plays off really well in the opening of this episode. But Clara entering the TARDIS and finding the Doctor naked, saying he's ready to go to church. I don't get why this scene exists, and I don't even get why this thread of this plotline exists. It's so odd. And then there's the whole scene of Clara taking the Doctor to see her family, where she's the only one that can see the psychic projection of his clothes. And I guess it kind of explains why at the end of the story, the whole story forgets to bring Clara back to this Christmas. So, from the perspective of the family, she left from Christmas and then arrived in Glasgow, presumably after Christmas, and just no one talks about it. I'm jumping ahead to the next episode, but you get what I mean. This whole, it's a bold, bizarre opening, but it has interesting character stuff for them. When the Doctor and Clara entered the town inexplicably called Christmas, we get what passes for character development, where Clara, while under the influence of the truth field, is saying everything about her personality out loud, and she announces that she's a control freak. Now, the embarrassment that she shows for having said that does work a little bit better by her saying, I don't like this fact about me. Like, that's technically, better, but it's still not the most subtle of character development. They then go into the tower in the city and immediately find the crack in the wall, which Clara says, "What are you saying? It's just a crack in the wall. There's light coming out of it. What's wrong with you? I normally wouldn't talk about this in here, but how can she not say anything? How can she just say it's a regular crack in a wall?" Anyway, then after discovering what's going on with the Time Lords wanting to come back, the Doctor tricks Clara into going back home, and it works really well for him. He's done it before, as we know. And then when Clara pops back in as the TARDIS is taking off by latching onto it, she seems to take the fact that for the Doctor it's been 300 years pretty well. It works. But what really I like here is when Clara's discussing, the predicament the Doctor's in, and she says with complete confidence that she would have been able to prevent the situation the Doctor is stuck in. I admire the confidence. But that was a lot. Then later, the Doctor tricks her again into going back, and this time she doesn't piggyback on the TARDIS. And so she's just sad that she lost the Doctor, and it's understandable, and it does play well. And being sad at Christmas is a really good visual. They're like in the Lethal Weapon movies, or just anything with Shane Black, it's a good image. It works well. Clara being brought back in at the end of the episode, at the end of the Doctor's life, is a moment that plays really well. And her interactions with 11 at this point, when he's old and decrepit, works really well and shows her tenderness and helpfulness and care. And it's going to play off really well in the future, but we'll get to that episode in a minute. Okay. Big point for the episode. Clara's speech to the crack in the wall and, to the Time Lords is, again, this is getting very close to reviewing the episode, which I don't want to do in this, but her passion for the Doctor and rejection of the knowledge that she gained a rejection of the knowledge that she learned in Journey to the Center of the TARDIS, of the Doctor's name, and recognizing who the Doctor is at his core is good. That aspect of this conversation, or rather speech, works really well. What doesn't work is how that plays into her story, and the entire point of the plot of the episode. It's counter to literally everything this story is doing, because the Time Lords are hoping to learn that this is the Doctor. And here she's saying, yes, this is definitely the Doctor. Please help him. And because he is who he is. And it's Again, the speech works well for Clara, but the episode doesn't make sense. Like I said, it's furthering her passion for the Doctor and her concern and caring for him. I'll get more into this into the next episode, but at the end, when the Doctor regenerates, Clara's shock that there's going to be a new Doctor, it doesn't quite play true to me, because when you consider that, again, this is just going to be a thing that hangs over Clara, is that she saw every single one of the Doctor's lives. I mean, it just barely works if you consider she didn't expect the Doctor she was traveling with to change. But, she should know that's an aspect of him after she has seen literally every single Doctor that we knew of at the time. Not getting into it. Anyway, let's move on to Deep Breath. Enter Doctor number 12. So after they've gotten the Doctor down in bed so he can rest and recover from regeneration, we get to the bit that I think that would work if this was literally any other companion than Clara. And yes, I am growing bored of bringing this point up. It's just a thing, like I said a little bit ago, that hangs over every single episode Clara is in. But because Clara has seen everything of the Doctors, she shouldn't be shocked by the Doctor changing. and again, I just rewrote this wholly. This was like written on a different date, but yeah, I guess she didn't expect it to happen to her, but it still reads as off. Now, I will say her confusion that the Doctor has a brand new face, but it's a face with lines on it and he's gray, does make sense to a point. Like, if it's a new face, you would expect it to be a young face. Maybe not necessarily a kid, but you would expect a new face to be a young face. I can understand that. But Clara's conversation with Madame Vastra is really nice. I love Clara's interaction. Jumping ahead again, I love Clara's interaction with the Doctor while he's looking at the burning dinosaur. Yeah, again, I'm still not talking about the plots, really. But her conversation with him is quite comforting. She's recognizing that what the Doctor needs here is someone to be able to ask him the question so that he can give the answer he wants to give. And it shows that even though she's struggling with this Doctor, she still sees him and understands him. I love Clara's comedic interactions with Strax as he's giving her a medical examination. And while I do like her not wanting Strax to tell her how long she has to live, I'm kind of curious if his device would have been able to guess that Face the Raven was coming. I do doubt it, though, because it is studying biology, but it's just one of those things that when you know a character's going to die, it's impossible to really ignore. Okay, since I am also trying to talk about the Doctor a little bit here, I'm going to divert from even talking about his relationship with Clara to just talk about something that amuses me. The Doctor gets a comment about his delight at being Scottish in this incarnation, and therefore he gets to really complain about things. This is delightful to me. I don't know anything about Scottish people, and I'm not saying anything about them with this. The only thing I know is that Scottish people drank Boston dry during the World Cup. And then they kept putting traffic cones on all the statues. It's delightful. I love it. But it's just wonderful within this episode hearing little bits of culture that I do not fully understand, and just having it exist there and just be a thing about it. Like the Doctor going, ooh, I can finally really complain about things. Excellent. And that's just nice. I like that. But then later, Clara gets a newspaper that has information that says, Impossible Girl. And I do get the impression that the whole Impossible Girl thing has gone from something that, as I have said earlier, reads a little weird to me, but it's become a point of commonality that they know about each other and can use to communicate. But then at the diner, you get a really delightful scene between the two of them where they're talking about how the other person is a massive egomaniac for putting that ad in the newspaper. But neither of them did it, and they both think the other did, and fully think that the other is owning up to them being the egomaniac. It's just a delightful interaction. It works really well. Their friendly jabs at each other for who's the egomaniac, and Clara seemingly co-signing on it, her being an egomaniac, but not wanting to actually process it, works really well and is fairly decent characterization for her, as she has now fully transformed into this version of modern Clara. Because like I said during the Matt Smith era during Series 7, she was a bit vacant as a character, but here she has fully crystallized into a new form, and I like it. And I've just, at this point in my notes, I had just reached the end of the diner scene as they're lowered in the elevator, and all I can say is, Clara gets on better with Jenna Coleman gets on better with Peter Capaldi than she did with Matt Smith. Which is so weird, because they cast her for the 11th Doctor, but the way the 12th Doctor sincerely oh, sorry, I conflated two notes here, but their chemistry just works really well. It's a good friendly relationship that we have here of people who just can rib at each other, and it works. And I'm just now going to drop in that comment I wrote here about the 12th Doctor, because I do love the way he sincerely and genuinely asked for a kid's menu. It's perfect. I do really like how this whole sequence is showing their connection, and that the Doctor didn't even really discuss his plan. Because when the elevator gets down, the Doctor sort of drops the sonic screwdriver onto the floor for Clara to flip up into his lap so he can press it. And, they don't even discuss the plan. He just drops it on the floor, and she understands exactly what she needs to do. They know each other really well at this point, and they just do it. It works really well. But then you get a scene where the Doctor seemingly abandons Clara when they get separated by a door closing on them. And it's a really good introduction to this incarnation of the Doctor and their relationship, and also who Clara is. Because while she is upset and a bit devastated that he's abandoned her, she's very quickly able to just square up and go, okay, gotta figure this out. And she pretends to be one of the robots that are wearing skin of people. And the only thing that's off is that she's not a composite. She's not made up of multiple parts, but she's able to play along well enough. But then, when she is caught by the head clockwork guy, which I should have grabbed it, but I have one of those little Titan vinyl figures of him, and I'm very happy to have it. I love the look of this guy. But when he's talking with her and threatening her, I like the way Clara talks herself out of him basically threatening to kill her by her saying, "You started too hard at the beginning of your threats," and she's using school teaching as a lesson point. It ties in nicely to her career, and it ties her new career into the plot of the episode in a way that works really well and makes it less of a, hey, we're just going to make her the teacher at Coal Hill because it's the 50th anniversary and we need Coal Hill to be referenced. It actually feels like it's part of the character rather than just a reference. But I will also say, Clara's performance in here, Jenna Coleman playing Clara here, it really works here. I love this scene as she's confronting this guy, because it's an incredible demonstration of genuine bravery. Here, she is terrified throughout the entire interaction with the guy, but she does not give him an inch of groundwork to use. And usually in lots of media, people like to portray bravery as just being strong in a moment. But here, it's that vulnerability that makes the bravery actually come out, and it works really well. Then, of course, the Doctor reappears, and he tells the clockwork guy, don't try to control a control freak. Clara's, desperate insistence that I am not a control freak! It works really well. It's the kind of characterization that, like I said, it feels very new, but it works really well. And the way it's insisted on here and the way it is reacted to makes it actually feel more real than what it sort of had, like I said, during Series 7. Because I really didn't pick up on that during Series 7. But after everything has calmed down... sorry. Oh, nope, I did read that already. But then, after everything has calmed down, Clara, not being 100% sure that she knows the Doctor is coming back anymore, and... What did I write? Okay, sorry. Sometimes I have to actually read this before I say it. But after everything's calmed down and they've gone back to Glasgow, Clara, not being 100% sure that she knows the Doctor anymore, the way it's acted in the ending scene in particular, works extremely well. Like I said, it's not necessarily as believed having watched all the other episodes and, again, remembering that she's seen everything, but it's it like the acting way works. And the phone call with the 11th Doctor and the way the 12th Doctor interacts with that afterwards works really well. And Clara's conversation with the 12th Doctor afterwards is also excellent. And the Doctor's reaction to her hugging him is great. I love it. He's like, "No, I don't do hugs. Why are you doing this?" It's good. I like it. Great episode. Yeah, we got me filming another bit for this after filming another video. Yes, I know I'm behind with the other one coming out before. I film ahead. This will be fine. So let's go on to Into the Dalek. Clara flirting with Danny here works really well and integrates her take charge attitude and just getting the situation to go the way she wants in a really fun and agreeable manner. But her connections with 12 at this point is also working really well. It's established they haven't seen each other since the last episode, but they're able to connect and dive straight into Dalek stuff, which works well. Clara in this episode is a bit more of a background element here, but because the main thrust of the episode is about the Doctor and his relationship with Rusty and his own personal character arc that he has going on, but there is still an amazing difference here between Clara being a background element in this episode and in, say, Cold War, where you could see in Cold War she was much more of a generic companion. Here you can see much more of her personality and her relationship with this Doctor in specific coming out. Like the scene where she says, "I'm his carer." It just adds to their banter, and their communication feels a lot more intact. But then, later on, Clara does come into the forefront later, when the Doctor is seemingly happy that his idea about the Daleks is correct. And upon repairing Rusty, he becomes evil again, and Clara is the one who encourages him to help it find its goodness again. And with the way it ends up going, with Rusty becoming just more hateful of the Daleks than he is of other creatures, which is not how the Doctor wanted it to go, especially not to be inspired by the Doctor. Clara's support of the Doctor in that aftermath, where she tells him she doesn't know if he's a good man, but she knows he tries, which is the important thing. And it works out well, and their connection works really well here. Onto the robot of Sherwood. So this episode starts with Clara being told to pick whatever place she wants to go in the universe, and she chooses Robin Hood, a fictional character. And it's really interesting, and it says a lot about her, but I honestly don't know if I can pin down specifically what it does. It's just such an odd, idealist choice that doesn't seem to fully gel with who Clara is in this season. Now, they do immediately find the actual Robin Hood, which is fascinating. Then, again, still leaning into that idealist version of Clara, I love that she immediately, like before coming out of the TARDIS, changes into a big red flowing dress set for the time where she is, and seeing Robin Hood works really well for this version of Clara that we see. And I just love her absolute delight at meeting all of the merry men. Then, after Robin Hood and the Doctor are all captured, we see a return to the standard Clara that exists for this season. When they're all locked up in the dungeons, and Robin and the Doctor are just bickering at each other, so she yells at them and calls them idiots. And points out, there's clearly no guard, no one's listening to us. I do like that because Clara is the most together of them, that's actually thinking through stuff properly, that it turns out there actually was a guard there who was listening to find who's the leader, and obviously concludes it's her. It's a good little character beat for her here. So, Clara's conversation with the Sheriff of Nottingham feels very doctorish. She is saying strange things that he doesn't understand, and she doesn't care that he doesn't understand. She just gets at the heart of the problem by pointing out that his robot army is robots for some reason, and, other such things. But then at the end, I like how Clara is hopping back onto her idealist side by learning how to shoot a bow from Robin Hood, and I do like the way it went with her in the middle, leaning into being more doctor-like, and it helped really show that the idealist stuff is her deliberately leaning into a different side of her personality that we just haven't seen before. It helps make the whole thing more cohesive here. At least that's how I'm choosing to interpret this. The episode Listen. We now get to the stuff building up more towards the thing I said I didn't like about Series 7, where Clara is splitting her life between, for lack of a better term, her real life and her TARDIS life. But it's actually working well here because Danny has come back and can see the effects of her having to split her life as they're on a date. It doesn't actually even start as a date problem. It's just as a, her splitting her life problem. It's just a really bad date at the start. But it's immediately pivoted by then having Clara going home to find the Doctor ready to go on an adventure. I like how Clara gets distracted while the Doctor is trying to use her active memory to find her childhood, and it actually leads to the guy she's seeing. She's saying to the guy she's seeing's childhood. It works really well and matches the state her mind is in right now. And also, young Danny is well casted. But the way Clara interacts with young Danny is honestly really sweet, and she's not approaching him like he's her future boyfriend. She's approaching him like he's a child, and honestly, she could have been a decent elementary school teacher based solely on this interaction. It's done really well here. And then, after the Doctor shows up and helps save them from whatever it is that was on the bed, we get to see how Clara and the Doctor interact here. And it's really good, because they each have their own mentality with stuff, but because Clara is leading with young Danny, she's the one telling the Doctor to shut up and let her do her thing. We don't see Clara using the Doctor to help herself text-to-speech is sometimes really bad. We then see Clara use the Doctor to help herself by having him take her back to try and fix her date with Danny. And we get some of that slight narcissism that Missy talks about eventually, with Clara complimenting her own looks as she sees the slightly younger her walk away. And then I die inside, because Clara manages to turn around the date and make it go really well, and then she accidentally uses information she got from traveling back in time and ruins it again a little bit. Clara is not managing the weirdness that's happening right now well at all. At least Danny does, though. He just gets up and leaves because he doesn't do weird, which, understandable. And, yeah, Clara is acting weird. She knows things she shouldn't, so it makes sense then, of course, that she spots especially once she spots the astronaut walking around the restaurant that no one else seems to notice. But it turns out that guy is a future Danny descendant. And her reaction to finding out Orson is Danny's descendant, and his clear indication that he knows who she is honestly perfect. And the hard cut to her just sitting with the Doctor is also great. I can totally believe that she just runs away from that situation and the revelation that comes afterwards. Later, Clara uses the telepathic circuits to she uses the trick that she did earlier, trying to go back to Danny's place, but she doesn't. The trick tricks her again. And we see more of Clara being really good with young kids, as she finds the young doctor, crying in his bed in the barn from the day of the doctor. I have thoughts about returning to the barn. Well, if this episode comes up for talk about, we'll go into it more. But Clara's reaction to finding out she's with the young doctor is really good. Her shock and terror at the prospect is great, and then her accidentally creating the terror that the doctor is right now trying to pursue, solve, and figure out works really well. It grabs your attention, pardon the pun. I do like that Clara is able to convince the 12th Doctor to just leave, but then we do see her talk with the young doctor, where she takes the lessons the doctor has given her and gives them back to the doctor. That works really well. She even uses the exact things that the 12th Doctor said in this episode to help him, instilling the doctor's own values in himself. Really clever stuff. But then, afterwards, we do see that Clara and Danny have somehow managed to work past the awkwardness, somehow without Clara explaining how she knew his actual first name that he apparently keeps secret. So, yeah. Time Heist. I like how we start with Clara getting ready for a date with Danny, while specifically not telling the doctor that that's what she's doing. I like that she's working really hard to keep these two lives separate. It actually adds something interesting to the companion in comparison to other times and other seasons, like especially in series 7. Sorry, my notes betray me right now. But in series 7, when she was nannying those kids, I don't feel like that split life aspect was as well developed as it is in this series specifically. Now, I'll just say I really like heist movies, and Doctor Who doing a heist story is fun, and I love how much fun Clara is having in it, even though she does start appropriately asking a ton of questions about it. Should we be doing this, especially when we have no memory of why we're doing this? And then I love the way the Doctor's reaction to blowing up the floor and the consequences of that. It's clear, it's retroactively setting up for Clara being more doctor-like, because the Doctor's very reckless here, and he says, "Oh, don't be pessimistic," saying, excuse me. And anyway, the Doctor's going, "Oh, don't be so pessimistic," saying we'll all die. And she says, "What if it does go wrong? Then we'll only be upset for a little bit." That type of attitude the Doctor's demonstrating is what she is going to portray later as she becomes more doctor-like. Now, the downside to this episode is that it isn't really a great showcase for Clara's character. She's there, but this is very much about the heist, which isn't a bad thing. I like this episode. It's good. It's just, when I'm specifically reviewing her character, it makes it hard to talk about this much. But I will say the ending with her telling the Doctor, "Don't rob any banks without me," is a really good bit. It shows the fun she had on this. And I go into the next episode's notes, but another note on the Doctor's character here is, and his relationship with Clara, is he does know she's going on a date, but he's comparing himself to this date whom he doesn't know, going, robbing a bank. See if any date could beat that. It's an interesting dynamic for them to have. For the purposes of this, we're going to be setting aside the age questions and stuff. It's weird. It's really weird, but it's definitely romantic in nature. And I will say that Clara, having gone to see all of the Doctor's lives, helps a bit, but yeah, it's still, yeah. Then, of the 3 episodes I'm talking about in this clip, forget that. If I was editing this, I would cut that line, but I'm not. So let's talk about the Caretaker next. And we move from an episode where Clara was basically a guest character for all she realistically contributed to that. This is an episode that is 100% about Clara, so we're going to talk about it for a bit. I maintain I'm still not a... I maintain that I'm still not a big fan of Clara splitting her time, or just any companion in general splitting their time between a TARDIS life and a quote-unquote real life. But I do appreciate this episode for showing just what a bad idea it is and how chaotic her life is as a result, with some fantastic editing and some fantastic transitions that happen. And it just makes this opening sequence really good. And Clara, the way she's portraying it, is just barely holding her 2 lives together, where she's having to make really bad lies for Danny to have him believe that, everything's normal. Then later, we see Clara in the TARDIS where she's snapping her fingers to close the doors. And I'm still not a fan of that. I don't really like that. But I do love her and Clara having a snap-off as to opening and closing the TARDIS doors. It works really well for their relationship. But Clara's face at the doctor coming in to be the caretaker at the school, it's perfection. The absolute shock horror at her 2 lives colliding is excellent. Something else I do like about this, yes, Clara is shocked and horrified at what's happened, but she first and foremost checks to make sure that her class and all the kids are safe. It's her number 1 concern, or at least minimum number 2, which is really good for her character that she's able to prioritize like that and get at what is most important. Now, it does make sense in this episode that it would slip into this is why I edit things. That it would slip into relationship shenanigans with the doctor because he knows she has a boyfriend, but he gets it confused with someone else, whom vaguely looks like the 11th Doctor, which, yeah, makes some sense, especially with where the Doctor is, especially with last episode. But this episode, the shenanigans are really about Clara desperately trying to keep her 2 boyfriends away from each other. Let's just be real, that's what they are. The last, this is the notes I had for it, talking about the doctor comparing robbing a bank to whatever date her boyfriend could possibly give her. They're just in a pseudo-romantic relationship. But Danny finding out about Clara's space travel stuff was inevitable. But I really like his acceptance of the sci-fi space stuff. It's honestly really good. But his initial conclusion that Clara herself is an alien, it's honestly not a wrong conclusion for him to come to. It works really well, especially for a dramatic beat in this story. But Clara's response to him saying that, of trying desperately to hang on to her lie, is understandable but pathetic. It's never gonna work, but I appreciate and I'm so fascinated that she tries. She wants these 2 lives to be as separate as possible, but they can't. And the whole pathetic mess of this whole thing works really well, where she's just in a mania and just trying to keep everything straight here. But of course, everything had to be admitted, and Clara is having to explain that she loves him, and in this emotional beat, I'm the way it's played, I feel like this is her first time telling Danny she loves him, and it's such a weird bad point for her to say that, but narratively, this whole thing works really well. But Clara taking care of the situation by and leading Danny out after learning everything, and she like, the way she does it is so interesting. I would describe it as practically being patronizing. She's walking Danny down the steps out of the auditorium. And it's just such an interesting beat, because Danny wasn't really too shocked at that point, but she's still doing it. And he's accepting of it. So maybe he was a little more shocked than I realized. But, yeah, that's the whole thing. Anyway, But then, immediately afterwards, even while Danny's still in the room, the Doctor insisting that Clara has to explain to him who Danny is. It's really good, and again, helps define their relationship with it. This whole sequence is really helping define her relationship with both of these men. There's no way I can do this whole thing justice, especially with the fact that I'm just having to breeze through these to get to the next episodes. But it's just really good character dramatic situations that I did not fully appreciate the first time. This whole sequence is just excellent. But in the aftermath of this scene, and I'm pretty sure based on what I've seen later, it's Clara's apartment they go back to. I could be wrong. But Danny and Clara have a conversation away from the Doctor. And it's a bit short, but it's pretty good. And for the time that they, are able to give to the scene, it really works well. And honestly, I'm just amazed Danny doesn't break up with her. Because he's learning that she's been lying to him this entire time. To me, that would be an instant deal breaker on anything here. But the way he's responding to it really works well. But then later when Clara sneaks Danny onto the TARDIS with the wristwatch the Doctor has that turns people invisible, and then the Doctor, of course, spots him because he's the Doctor, works really well. The way Danny and the Doctor bounce off each other just works and points at both of their insecurities in their own lives they see in each other, and it works so well. Okay, jumping ahead to when the creature, that was auto-corrected to preacher. Am I really bad at pronouncing things, or does this just hate me? Anyway, so jumping ahead to when the creature, that's the, plot of the whole thing, blah, 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 blah. There's this bit where Clara and Danny have to rush out because of doing parent-teacher conferences because the Doctor found that the creatures returned earlier than they expected. And I just like this little moment where one of the parents says, our kid was right about those two. It's such a great little detail because both of them earlier in the episode were concerned about if the kids knew about their relationship. And the parents of the kids are like, oh yeah, it's definitely true. We know that for sure now. It's not important to the plot, but I like it. But then in the aftermath of, defeating the creature, I really like Clara and Danny's next conversation, where Danny is able to accurately point out the dangers of the Doctor. Yes, the Doctor is the type of person who will push you to be better, stronger than you knew you could be, but that puts you in danger. And as we saw with Face the Raven, yeah, he's right. Okay. The next one. Okay. I wrote more notes than I'm going to read for this one. I'm going to just... how do I put this? Kill the Moon. Kill the Moon, apparently, I saw a thing a while ago that the writer said that this thing isn't about abortion. It is. It's a tangled and confused metaphor, and, it's not that I don't want to talk about this topic, it's that this topic does not work well for something with as little prep time as I have for it, because I think the entire thing is just muddled in a confused metaphor that I don't think works, but it's definitely the topics they're talking about, and things contrast with each other in this. So I'm going to just talk about Clara in this, and there's not a super ton for me to talk about that's, like, not tied into the plot super well, and, like, if this comes up on the picker wheel, we'll talk about it, but, yeah, it needs more time than I can give here. And like I said, I wrote down a bunch of notes, but the more I thought about it since I watched it last night, I'm like, yeah, we're not going to talk about it much. But also, I'll say, since I'm talking about the Doctor's character a bit and Clara's, the Doctor starts this episode as more of an asshole than normal. He doesn't care about someone going crazy as a result of him telling her she's not special. That's a character I completely skipped over in the last episode because it didn't matter in relation to Clara. But when he's confronted with that, he's just like, whatever, okay, fine, I'll take her somewhere. And then, when they arrive on the spaceship, they're like, oh, we're gonna kill him. And he's like, oh no, kill the little girl first, then my companion, then kill me a bunch of times. Whatever, who cares? It's just... it's weird. It's really weird. But then there's one bit that, like, honestly baffled me. I feel like the writers just missed this, but at one point when the moon is, like, potentially breaking up and gonna go away, Clara says, but wait, the moon's there in the future. They forgot about the episode Cold War, where they already had this conversation about how if you affect things, it will change the future. We're time travelers. We interfere. We change things. Anything's possible. Like, that conversation happened already. Okay, so after the plot, which again, this is the wrong time to talk about the plot. We have Clara doing something I really like, where after they've dropped everyone off, she confronts the Doctor alone about stuff he did in the episode. Like, basically, humanity has a choice of what to do with the giant egg moon, and he's like, okay, you're humanity. You decide. I'm out. And she's like, why did you do that? Why did you abandon us? And it's a fair point. But what I like about it is that she is doing it in private. I don't know. It feels right for their relationship, at least. But I do find it interesting that at the beginning of the episode, Clara was talking about how the little girl from the last episode was made to feel like she's not special because of what the Doctor said. And the episode ends with Clara not feeling special because the Doctor treated her like every other human. That's the way she frames that. She clearly thought she was more important than what the Doctor treated her as. Which, based on her history, she is. But she is equally also just an ordinary human, which is an interesting contradiction for her to be. It makes her interesting here. And it's an interesting thing to drive her to say she doesn't want to travel with the Doctor. The thing is, this episode was, like, this is literally what I wrote here. The episode is so bizarre, it doesn't quite feel earned to me. But I do appreciate what this episode is trying to do for her character in terms of finding a point where she is choosing to try and walk away from the Doctor. But the ending with Clara alone in her apartment looking at the moon honestly works really well for a moment for her here. You almost feel the regret and the pain of everything, and like in equal measure. It's a really well done, sad, confused in a like character narrative sense. Like, she's not even fully sure of how she feels at this moment, and it works. But honestly, at this point, I'm just excited to, in the next episode, be talking about one of my favorite Who writers. I really love Jamie Matheson's stuff. Let's get to his story. Anyway, sorry about this one. Just Yeah, it needs more time than I can give it. It's a lot. Mummy on the Orient Express. I love the clear indication that even though this is supposed to be one last trip for Clara before they officially separate, that's the word I'm going to go with, uh, you can tell immediately that Clara's excited to be traveling again from the big smile she has on her face as soon as she gets out of the TARDIS. Clara narrates a very interesting thing. She talks about an artist she saw, like a music artist, who said hatred is too strong an emotion for someone you don't like. And it's been weeks since the last episode, apparently, so she realized that she missed the Doctor during that time, and that's that's a good reason for her continuing to travel. It is a little frustrating that this moment is a big tell don't show, but they've already been showing a lot with her being happy and excited to be traveling again, so I'm willing to let it go. But also, it is the right after, in response to that, the Doctor uses what I've only seen online, like not in reference to this moment, but just in general, referred to as autistic riz, by him just sharing facts about planets. Like, he just wants to talk about the planets. Let him talk about the planets. But Clara desperately wants the Doctor to see her and come visit her after they stop traveling. And that just points to a really interesting character dynamic for them to have, because this whole episode is supposed to be them doing one last trip before they separate. But they're just still pretending that they're going to separate. But then Clara, later in her own room, calls Danny to talk through, and it truly does sound like she is trying to convince herself to, again, for lack of a better term, break up with the Doctor. Which even Danny acknowledges she's using the language of that because what she's saying is, I can't just dump him. Which, yeah, it's a relationship. There's so much that could be said about the age gap here, and you should, but again, I just feel like pointing out, for the sake of just talking about Clara as a character, just breezing through this, I still say that, like, it's just, like, it's written justifications by using the she traveled his entire timeline in the was it the name of the Doctor? Yeah. So you have that, but it's okay. A timer went off on my phone, so the recording stopped. I'll go. I'll go handle that later. But just in case I missed it on my notes here, it is interesting that Danny even points out that Clara, during this, is using the language of romantic relationships by her saying, "I don't want to just dump him," which, yeah, she clearly views this as a thing with a hint of romanticness. And I can't just let it go that the writers have come up with a way to have a older man and a younger woman in a romantic relationship. And the best I can tell, like, the only thing that narratively justifies it is that Clara like, they did it also with Rose, and it's just, I'm 32 now, and just the ideas behind that are so frustrating. It's weird. It's so weird. I can't let it go. Okay. Now, normally, like I said, I try to just talk about Clara or the Doctor in relation to Clara, but I'm just going to drop a random thing about this episode. This was my first time actually rewatching this episode since I'd started watching Taskmaster a couple years ago. So it was really interesting to see Frank Skinner in this. He is excellent as the vaguely creepy train engineer, but yeah, it's fun actually recognizing his voice this time. But then there's this other character who's like a daughter, granddaughter, something of someone who died from the mummy. Yeah, I'm again not the episodes, but she points out to Clara that a goodbye trip is something that doesn't make sense with what their relationship had been earlier. And it's honestly a great point. And Clara's stunned silence and realization that she somewhat had pointed out earlier herself without seemingly realizing it works really well. Her whole conversation with this character works really well. It's nice. It's not nice that basically for the rest of the episode they're kind of just literally locked in a room for most of it. It's a good episode. It's not a great Clara episode, even though I still have a bunch of notes here. But anyway, afterwards, the Doctor tries to get Clara out of the room where she's trapped, and I think I genuinely just missed them getting stuck. But then the Doctor is captured, and then afterwards gets put in a library to examine the Foretold, a creature that they basically just guessed is what it was, and it was. But Clara just goes in the room she's trapped in and research and finds out information and runs the manifest and stuff and figures out that that there have been other trains that are doing the exact same thing that's happening on this one. And it's a really nice point for her character to be at, where she's just going, okay, I gotta do something, I'll just do what I can to figure out what's going on. I really like it. But the Doctor getting the granddaughter character I mentioned earlier that's trapped with Clara to him by saying, oh, just, Clara, just lie to her. Then it's okay. We'll figure out what's going on. And then Clara does it. She lies to this woman who the Doctor has figured out is going to be the next victim of the Foretold, and tells her the Doctor will save you, just get here, even though she has no confidence in it. It's a really good character choice for her, where she'll go along with it in the moment and reprimand afterwards. That has been her methodology with stuff for a while. But speaking of stuff, there are moments where she will reprimand the Doctor in front of others, mainly in relation to him deceiving her. Like, Clara figures out that the Doctor knew that the trip on the train had the high chance of being dangerous and calls him out on it, while acknowledging and she also says out loud that he made her his accomplice in what's going to happen to Daisy, the granddaughter character. Yes, I finally wrote down her name. Good on me! But in the aftermath of them defeating the mummy and saving Daisy, still Clara is relieved that the Doctor was, quote, only pretending to be heartless, unquote. And she can still accept it, and it sort of makes her feel like they're trying to make it to where Clara's problem in the last episode, like, the writers are trying to make it to where Clara's problem with the Doctor in the last episode has been solved. But just because the Doctor knows that certain outcomes are likely to happen. It's really interesting here, because I'm not certain that has solved it, but it works a bit. But afterwards, the Doctor has a really good quote. He says, "Sometimes all you have are bad choices, but you still have to choose." I feel like that's a really good quote for life. Clara makes a decision at the end of the episode, and she chooses to lie to Danny and the Doctor by telling the Doctor Danny's fine with her continuing to travel, and telling Danny, oh yeah, no, I'm definitely done traveling with the Doctor. This is only going to work out great. And she's clearly not ready to give this up. Both Clara and the Doctor are delighted and immediately go on another adventure. I find this really interesting for a couple of points. On the first hand, this is an interesting way for the writers to have their cake and eat it too, where Clara can tell both Danny and not tell Danny, but it's an interesting bit of character drama to happen in the middle of the season. Really, it's towards the end, as we'll see in a minute, but like I said with the last episode, I didn't quite believe her choosing to give up traveling with the Doctor. Narratively this works a bit, but also not. It's just a little off to me. But the biggest problem I have with this episode, really, is that Clara's not in the episode as much, which makes the fact that it's the episode that convinces Clara to keep traveling with the Doctor doesn't quite work as well. It's a little thing, but the episode is great, just not for Clara, as I mentioned earlier. This is the fun of improvising and reading your notes. But let's move on to Flatline. This is one of the episodes that I rewatched, actually the first episode that I rewatched in my initial preparations for the Face the Raven review. So it's an absolute pleasure to be returning to this. And it's interesting that I can even say at the beginning of my rewatch right now that of the 2 Jamie Matheson scripts for Series 8, that I used to think the Mummy one was better, but this one's better. It's amazing that I changed my mind on that, but yes. Still not his best script. That's sadly not going to be part of this video, but yeah. Anyway, I think I talked about it in the Face the Raven review, but the miniature TARDIS in this whole sequence is absolutely adorable. It's great. But I love Clara after the TARDIS has shrunk and the Doctor's gone in to try and figure it out. She goes traveling to try and figure out what's going on, what could be sapping the dimensions. And she just meets someone who she's instantly able to have a Doctor-companion relationship with. It works really well. And yes, I feel like I can say this. It was a thread that had been picked up in a couple episodes earlier. I think it was the Robin Hood one, but I can't remember for certain, and I'm not doing that research. But this is continuing the thread of Clara acting more Doctor-like, which is her most interesting thread right now. Most of what I've seen so far in this is stuff that just is better defining her character. This is an actual, choice she's making that as it continues that works really well. And I love the way that Clara is going about being the Doctor. She introduces herself in ways to lightly roast the Doctor while he's listening through an earpiece she has on. But Clara does so good at saying insane things that the companion being Rigsy here, finds insane, but to her is normal. And it works really well here, because the audience has accepted these things as well, like her mentioning a shrink ray. To us, that's normal. To Rigsy, it sounds insane, but she just confidently moves on. She truly is acting like the Doctor here. It's great. And I just love how the Doctor passes Clara a sledgehammer through the tiny TARDIS, and she just accepts it like, okay, I guess I gotta smash the cop's head in. But then she goes, oh, they're in the walls. And I need you to understand right here that when I wrote this down, I was laughing. I even specifically wrote down, I needed to be known I'm laughing while typing this because it's hilarious. But Clara then gets a call from Danny, and she's having to lie about it while the Doctor hears. And then she's also having to escape from danger, which is, again, just a really fun, interesting point here. And the Doctor instantly clocks it, and he does not let Clara forget that he knows she's been lying to Danny. And it works really well for their relationship. And also, when she meets up with the other people and everything, Clara immediately takes charge, just like the Doctor. And even with her being thrown off by someone who's not able to read the psychic paper, she reacts exactly the same way the Doctor does. You even see a cut that shows them reacting very similarly. But Clara is very good at taking the Doctor's advice of being in charge, and by her just going up and giving someone a job of something to do. It's an excellent move, and she confronts the person who's challenging her for a leadership position by saying, I'm the one chance you have to stay alive, stunning him into silence. It works really well, and again, very Doctorish. She knows exactly what to do and how to do it. And there's this really interesting thing here, where the Doctor and Clara talk to each other, sort of in private, where she walks away a little bit, and they're just talking about things and the philosophy of what it is to be the Doctor, which is just such a great opportunity for them to deconstruct the Doctor's character and the types of actions the Doctor takes and why. It's really, really good here. But jumping ahead in the story a bit, they find a train and decide, yes, let's ram into the creatures, the boneless. And Rigsy chooses to try and sacrifice his life. And Clara, again, does a really good Doctor thing, where she just comes up with a solution to where he doesn't have to sacrifice himself. It's real easy, and it convinces Rigsy to be saved. Really good moment. But it's about what comes afterwards that is really good. Clara is at one point not able to communicate with the Doctor, so she has no choice but to try and figure it out on her own. And even though her plan ultimately does come down to figure out a way to get the bad guys to help bring the Doctor back, and then just letting the Doctor handle it, she comes up with an incredibly Doctor way of solving this problem and getting that to happen. And she's very good at doing that and controlling the room exactly like the Doctor with her own personal brand of whimsy. I really like it. She asserts the kind of confident, cheery way to be able to do what it is she's doing, and the fact that the plan also involves Rigsy doing the thing he got in trouble for is just really clever writing, and I love it. And also, I love how Clara is able to convince Rigsy to do it by accusing him of not being able to. And he's like, no, now his honor's hurt. Now his pride's been hurt, so he has to do it. It's it's really good. But also, again, this is not actually a review of the episode, but oh my word, the CGI holds up so well in this, especially for the boneless creatures. Part of it's because they're only in it a little, but my word, it looks so good. They're so creepy and wrong, and they look bad in a way that feels correct for this type of role that they hold. But I love just as the Doctor's stuck in the TARDIS, slowly freezing to death and losing everything, he's just reassured his companion that she would make a very fine Doctor. Which is accurate based on how this is going. And yes, I know, as he's reassuring her, she can't hear him, but him trying to is the important piece here. But at the very end, after the day is saved, the Doctor is free, and the TARDIS is big again, we get a very interesting character dynamic between Clara and the Doctor, where Clara keeps insisting on being told she was a good Doctor, and the Doctor will only say she was extraordinary as the Doctor. Goodness doesn't come into it. And it's a really good point in the Doctor's character arc at this point, because he's been going through an arc that I've been skipping over, so yeah. We then come to In the Forest of the Night. This was apparently based on a poem, which I only really know from The Mentalist. I don't actually remember enough about The Mentalist to say more than that. This is a much hated episode, and honestly I don't really have much of an opinion from memory, so we'll see what I think. I like that Clara sent someone to find the Doctor, apparently, because of course the Doctor is going to show up because everything in the world has turned into a giant forest for no reason. Also, why has Coal Hill set up a field trip with just two teachers leading it, and the two teachers happen to also be dating, and everyone knows it? I just feel like people would have problems with that. I'm not a teacher, though. I could be wrong. Ironically, the episode where we get to see Clara acting as a teacher the most, even more so than the one that took place at Coal Hill School, The Caretaker, it's this one. It's this episode that shows her interacting with students the most. It's not bad, it's just weird. But Clara says that the Doctor is just covering for time, But after this group meets up with the Doctor and the Doctor's doing his thing, Clara mentions that the Doctor is just covering for her time while he figures out something which, of course, she would know now. She just played the Doctor in the previous episode. I also love how Danny is able to instantly tell that Clara has not stopped traveling with the Doctor. I kind of feel like it would have been better if there was more episodes than just the previous episode for this drama. But I guess the very next episode isn't bad. It could be worse. It could have been no episodes. But I'll also say, based on this being one of the only episodes where she's acting like a teacher, she's not a bad teacher. She works well with the kids, so that's good. That's something that I mentioned back in the Caretaker episode, where her first concern is the kids, and here she's concerned about them. So she leaves them all with Danny because she trusts him, and then goes off with the doctor. But she doesn't leave them somewhere that she doesn't trust, so that's good. But I will say, there probably should have been 2 teachers. But I guess one competent one is a decent second thing. Again, not a teacher. We then get a really good interaction between the Doctor and Clara, where Clara is just concerned that Danny could have figured out that she was still seeing the Doctor, even though the book that was left on the TARDIS from the student was dated for that date, so Danny could probably figure it out. And the Doctor's response is, "Are you seriously concerned about that?" This is another thing about Clara's control issues, which she has actually managed to hide pretty well a lot of the time, but this is just one instance where she can't. And then the little girl that is the focus of the episode, who is apparently psychic. Yeah, I'm skipping over the plot. I just need to comment on this. I love the shot where we see the tiger in the forest as a reference to the poem, of which I believe is the reference for this, which I only know one line, again from The Mentalist. "Tiger, tiger, burning bright, in the forest of the night." Then there's another line whose rhythm is very nice, but I can't remember it. I just looked it up. It's "What mortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry?" And then The Mentalist never read another line. And who knows, I could be wrong about the poem, about that this is the poem that's being referred to, but I'm, again, not doing research, just talking about Clara mostly, while talking about the episodes occasionally. I do love Danny just appearing after the Doctor and Clara have gone off on their own, and Danny's able to solve the problem. Like, just, it's practicalityness that makes sense with him being a soldier, and they're kind of vague on where he was doing his soldier thing. He could have been around tigers, but he's able to scare the tiger off using a flashlight, I believe. But yeah, they're, again, them being vague-ish about where Danny was stationed up until this point. I watched the other 2 episodes. I think they might have mentioned where it was specifically with that, but yeah, I'll get to it when I get to those ones. But again, jumping ahead in the story, we get a very interesting, insightful line into Clara, where Clara is asking the Doctor to save them, or just a few of them, and says that Danny would never abandon the kids, which sort of implies that she would, which sort of goes against what I've been saying was made her a decent teacher, at least one who gets along with the kids and cares about them. Okay, after that, I backed the episode up to rewatch that segment because it seemed so out of character for her. And it's because, where are they going to leave the kids? Are they going to just spend forever wanting their parents, or are we going to abandon them? And apparently the answer to that question is, yes, we're going to abandon them. But then Clara does say that she doesn't want to be saved on her own, which is much better. It does point to her being more consistent, and especially consistent within Series 8. And I do like that as I was writing this out for these notes, and I was hearing it and feeling the waves of revelations here, it really points to something super interesting about Clara, which is she didn't actually want any of them to be saved by the Doctor. She was just trying to save the Doctor and get him out by convincing him he was saving everyone, which again is really interesting and just is an interesting way for her to manipulate while staying consistent in what she's trying. She's trying to protect the most people in the best way she knows. It works. But then the Doctor says, "This is my planet too. I walk your earth and breathe your air." And with Gallifrey at this point being lost, yeah, we'll go with that. This is his new home, his adopted home. Then later, when the Doctor has figured out what's going on with the trees, He gets everyone in his TARDIS and treats it like an actual classroom. It's great. But then the Doctor concluding they didn't actually need to do anything. The Earth is saving them from a giant solar flare. Honestly, with this Doctor in particular coming across problems that aren't problems I like a bit, and it works. I don't like it as much for his final episode. It's not a bad thing, it's just a little weird way to end the note. Weird way to end his whole run on. But anyway, I'm now talking about an episode that's not part of the run I'm trying to talk about. But anyway, Clara and Danny flirt and then kiss in front of the kids, who of course cheer because kids saw their teachers kiss. Of course! Also, Danny does call Clara out because he knows that the book was on the TARDIS recently and that she was there, and he's weirdly okay with this. And I guess after the first time of her being caught being a liar, he can't really be surprised at her being a liar again, but I'm not convinced that... I don't think that was a good beat for him. Honestly, he shouldn't have found out here. Yeah, we'll get to it in the next episode. But, yeah, like, Danny's just a bit inconsistent in this point, and it sort of ruins the ending a bit. We'll get to it when we get to it. But he just wants Clara to trust him and tell him that she loves him when she's sure. Anyway, the episode ends with Clara and the Doctor watching the sun sweep away the trees as the trees do their job of being burned instead of the Earth from the giant solar flare, a sentence that really only makes sense in Doctor Who, and they have a nice little laugh about it, well, at least with the Doctor saying, "I'm sure it'll work," which is just a nice, humorous bit in showing them continuing reconnecting as they have been the last couple episodes. Dark Water. The last episode involving Danny was about him learning that Clara is traveling with the Doctor again, and sort of muddling his character a little bit. I really think that whole sequence just fails, especially when you consider the opening bit to this episode, where Clara is seemingly choosing to love Danny, live with him, etc., whatever. And she just sees a future with him and is choosing to go with that. And then Danny dies due to random chance. It's a perfect tragedy. And later in the episode, when he's... Excuse me. Then later in the episode, when he's technically comes back to life, there's room for drama there that was sort of nerfed by him learning that the Doctor's back. And I feel like the whole thing just got slightly muddled. Again, I'm not trying to review this, but I don't really know when I'm next going to be able to talk about this arc as an arc. So, yeah, just now. I just feel like that's lacking some drama, especially in part 2 when we get to that. But I will say, Clara's anxiety and trepidations and her preparations for the call where she's going to tell Danny she loves him and is seemingly wanting to abandon the Doctor for him, it's just played so well, and she's just on the phone with him, and then all of a sudden, Danny stops responding, and then another one picks up the phone to say he was hit by a car. Like I said, it's a perfect tragedy, played so well here. We then see Clara just being an empty, vacant mess, and as a result of all this in the aftermath, and again, it's great. But then she gets a call from the Doctor, and you see that instant, just through a look in her eyes, she knows what she has to do. Clara, through her anger and grief, tries to manipulate the Doctor to break the laws of time. It's really good, and it's her complete determination at doing everything that she can here, that just by destroying one TARDIS key just to get the Doctor's attention, and then going to try and destroy all the others. It's a really great, well-done sequence here. But her bravado breaks after she destroys the last key. It's such a good moment for her. She has been holding it together, expecting the Doctor to cave, and then just finally breaking down and going into grief when it doesn't work. But what's really great is it did work for the Doctor. He, for some reason, needed to see how far she was willing to go. And he's like, okay, let's go to hell. Let's get your boyfriend back. And he's doing it in a very different... He's helping her in a way that is very different from what he's done before. It's really interesting. But what I really like about their relationship here as it's working here is the Doctor tells Clara, don't be the grieving one. Be her regular self when they going to this area that seemingly exists for when you die. She's like, no, be yourself and then we'll find him easier and safer and stuff. But her unease as they're in the mausoleum is completely understandable. Between Missy being Missy and the skeletons in the boxes in the windows, yeah, it's a lot. But Clara threatening the guy to stop treating her overly nicely works. I like it. It's clearly her powering through the pain she's going through, and she's trying to focus on the task at hand, which just makes it work so well here. She feels so, like, focused here. It works. But then the Doctor and Clara are able to get on the phone with Danny in the afterlife, which, I'll just say, it's an insane concept, but the Doctor being skeptical of this whole thing works, and he insists Clara determine that it really is Danny, which is great, and she does work to do it. She just gets in, locks into the zone, and goes, I need to be sure. She doesn't just enjoy the fact that she finally has Danny back, which, again, works really well here. And it's even her just focused, like, doctorish, trying to get through stuff by yelling at Danny at one point to stop saying you love me until I know for certain it's you. And then he says I love you again, and she hangs up. It's a good beat for both their characters because that's what Danny wanted to do. He wanted her to move on, which is, it's great. Then Clara eyes down a Cyberman. Yeah, just bad timing for this whole situation for her. Yeah, anyway, that's part 1. I don't have any other Clara-related notes for part 1. I didn't even take any other notes, because this is the Clara video. Anyway, let's go on to Death in Heaven. Clara gets herself out of being killed by the Cybermen by pretending to be the Doctor, which again is part of her best thread. And from what we've seen of her, this is a great... this works really well. And this is a great, strong way to open the episode. The only problem I have with this is she's not in the episode very much. This was one of the episodes that I originally rewatched in my lead up to the Face the Raven review, and it was really disappointing how little she featured in this episode. And it just, like, the first episode handled her grief and everything so well, and it was so focused on that I was sure part 2 would be continuing that thread, and it kind of just gets dropped mostly. It comes up a little bit, but this is mostly the story of the Doctor being the president of the world and going against the Master. Like, I get both of these things are individually good, but together it doesn't work. Then I just wrote down notes here about how I would review this episode if I ever did. Well, I will eventually if the randomizer gives it to me, but yeah, you can tell an episode's going well when you're just watching it specifically for a character and you get bored and go, because again, it's not that the episode's boring, it's that you're focused and you just go, okay, how would I review this? And I was just saying that it's weird. I just wrote down here my reasoning, which is it's weird that the first half was all about Clara, and she's not very much in the second one, because yes, Danny appears and becomes a Cyberman, and we see him do stuff, but she's essentially been forgotten from the story. So, yeah, it's so weird and frustrating. But then Clara continues to lie to this. We then finally see her again as she's continuing to lie to the Cybermen. And we, the audience, learn that it's Danny, but she's just continuing to try and pretend to be the Doctor. But it leads to an interesting bit here, where Danny, who is so traumatized from his soldiering days that the kids at the school just talking about, did he kill anyone, he gets so, he freezes up. But here, he's just like, oh, 3 Cybermen, boom, 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 done. And it's like, really? You're going to blast them with your arm cannon? And he just feels a little off. The last couple episodes have not been the best to Danny, so whatever. We next see Clara after she's essentially been just knocked out, and she's waking up in a graveyard. Perfect mood. And she's just incredibly passive in this sequence. She's a little scared, but she's mostly just standing around in a graveyard as all the Cybermen start bursting out of the ground. Again, I just wish this episode had been more about Clara. We then get a scene that comes close to the dramatic stuff that I mentioned would have been better if Danny hadn't known that she was traveling with the Doctor again. It would have worked really well here, but this kind of comes close. But right before learning that the Cyberman is Danny, Clara tells that Cyberman, Danny, that the Doctor is the closest person to her. She would never lie to him, never betray him, never turn him in. And Danny just removes the faceplate. We don't get a ton of bit here because this is interrupted by Missy talking with the Doctor, and she takes credit for being the person who gave Clara the phone number to call the Doctor and says, she's the control freak and you can never be controlled, which makes for a fun dynamic. And that fact together makes a fun dynamic with the 3 of them. The Doctor then joins them, and Danny and the Doctor get some more jabs at each other. Even as the Doctor's trying to do the best thing here and help save Danny as much as he can, Danny directly calls out the Doctor for his inability to do what is necessary to save the world in this instance, and that is to finish the conversion on Danny so that they can get the information about the Cybermen that they need in order to defeat them. The Doctor can't do it, understandably. But Clara, possibly out of her guilt, there's not a ton in the scene to really do that, to explain it, but she's the one who chooses to finish the conversion, and it's essentially just plugging in a cable via the sonic screwdriver. But Danny does not do what the Doctor expected. He is making the choices of his love for Clara to do what is best for everyone. I do feel like this is slightly off for the Cybermen who are going for pure logic and lack of individuality, and Danny here keeps his individuality and his personal choices, which are not logical, which is the whole thing with the Cybermen. But that's episode stuff. It kind of ties into character stuff, though, so that's why I'm talking about it. But Clara's revenge on Missy kind of gets skipped over because there's a Missy, the Brigadier, and Doctor moment. I'm not a fan of... Let's just move on. Clara then gets one last conversation with Danny. This is in the aftermath afterwards, back at her apartment, flat, whatever you want to call it. But she gets one last conversation with Danny, where Danny chooses to resolve his guilt issues from his soldier days, which does make sense for his character. It's the most in-character he's been all episode. But him choosing to, instead of reviving himself, revive the kid that died when he was a soldier, it makes sense. And the sadness Clara has for him making that choice also makes sense. It's a well-done tragic moment here. But the very ending of this one, where Clara and the Doctor are trying to do their best for each other by lying about their circumstances they're at so that the other can go off on their own like they think the other wants to, works really well. It's disappointing in a way that it's genuinely really good writing. Like, it's good tragedy here. And I kind of wish that they had actually stuck with this as an ending for Clara. Like, narratively, it works really well. It's sad in a way that is, like, it works. I don't feel like I'm describing this well. But then Clara hugs the Doctor, and I love the Doctor's reason for not liking hugs. Because you can hide your face when you do it. Which is exactly what Clara is doing. It works. But again, like I said, it feels like this separation moment for them is a lot more justified than the moment from Kill the Moon. Because they're both choosing to do it. And I think it's just better executed as a concept rather than the half-baked, the Doctor went too far, but not really. Especially if you can undo it in a quarter of an episode. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that one for lots of reasons. Anyway, last Christmas, I watched a lot of episodes. There's so much more. Anyway, Clara's excitement at finally being back in the TARDIS after who knows how long, we'll definitely talk about it later, is really good. I like this moment. But the Doctor and Clara arriving at the Arctic base, I wrote space base for some reason, where it doesn't matter how they got there. It was the TARDIS. I think I wrote down I couldn't remember where it was. But the Doctor tries to distract Clara from the situation she's in by saying, "Oh, what's Danny doing now? He's obviously back at home where you were, and he could be doing anything." And she slaps him. Yeah, well done move, even if he was alive, which he's not, which the Doctor learns. And is shocked about. It works really well for Clara here, because she's having to live with the consequences of her lie to the Doctor, and she's still emotionally raw from what happened to Danny. Who knows how long ago? In the aftermath of this, them just getting along like normal as far as Clara figuring out what the Doctor's meaning of, what plan they need to do, and afterwards them talking with what happened to this sentence? Anyway, after both of them had figured out that the other lied to them in that conversation at the end of the last episode, they just seem to both inherently understand that the loss of their friendship didn't need to happen. Which, again, really good, sad moment. But then later, when Clara is captured by a dream crab and goes into an idealized dream world where Danny is with her and they're celebrating Christmas together, she completely buys into it, which makes sense for where she is right now. It is her grief just continuing to play out. She's so deep in this grief that even as the Doctor manages to get a warning through by going into the dream world as well, she rejects it because she wants Danny to be alive. Because, of course she does. She's controlling the narrative and making it all work out well for her. I love how she's so determined to live into this fantasy, where even the Doctor managing to physically go in the dream doesn't dissuade her for her need for this to be the reality. It's so good. Well done here. But it also says something about the Doctor's character here, that he doesn't actually know how to get out of the dream scenario. He just has a guess, but he just jumped in. And he assumes the way to get out is to just accept this isn't the real world, and then they'll get out. But that's just a hope. He jumped in based purely on a hope, which points to where his relationship with Clara is at this point, even though they've been separated for an undetermined amount of time. Towards the end of the episode, when the Doctor asks Clara if she believes in Santa Claus, and she says, always. He just looks a little different now. It's a wonderful moment, and it points to a much healthier relationship for her and the Doctor, viewing him as a hero. The hero who will always come and always save her and anyone else that needs saving. I like this moment. Clara chooses to stay in the dreamscape for too long. It really works well. Here, it's an interesting point that she doesn't like her life and would rather live in a dream, which makes sense given what we learn as we see where the Doctor is able to wake her up. And I'll say they all did really well, and Clara was done. Now I see what this is. But when Clara wakes up, we see that it has actually been a long time. We see old Clara. And based on... This is going purely off of old rumors I heard. I feel like this is essentially fact within the fandom, but I could be wrong, but the episode plays out like I'm right. Apparently, this was originally supposed to be the official end for Clara, but at the very last minute, Jenna Coleman decided to come back for Series 9, so they tacked on an ending. But I really do like old Clara here. This whole sequence works really well. And I really like that through the editing, we can see that the Doctor genuinely still sees her the way he saw her before. And it does not come across as anything other than the Doctor always sees people the exact same way. It's like he's seeing into them, not their face. But I also really love the mature way Clara is recognizing that her and the Doctor wouldn't have worked out, but she still cares immensely for him. And I also had to guess that part of the reason people had backlash to Clara so much is that she was supposed to leave at the end of Series 8. And then she did the Christmas special, and then, like I said, there's a really obvious edit here where they tacked on an extra ending, an extra layer of dream, just to make it to where Clara could come back and be young this time. And then they didn't cut the other stuff because you already filmed it. I mean, why cut it? It's a little frustrating as a viewer of this episode. But what I do like about the actual ending is when Clara, is actually young now, and Clara asks, "Am I young?" The Doctor genuinely has no idea. It keeps that moment that I loved so much where they edited in young Clara and the Doctor truly was just seeing her as who she is and not as an age. He truly doesn't know. So that bit works really well. Okay, then I watched 2 other episodes, and they should be here on this list, but they're not, so if they're there, I'll edit this in. If not, I'll... Oh, there it goes. It finally reset. Okay. The joys of using the iPad here. Okay, 2 more episodes. So let's talk about The Magician's Apprentice. We meet with Clara being a teacher again. She seems to have settled back into a post-Danny Pink life fairly well. She's even gotten good conversations with the students where she has one student spit her gum into the trash can amongst other gum, and the student goes, "Look after it so I can get it back later." And Clara goes, "How can you tell which one's yours?" Which just is a perfect humiliation for the student to go, "I do not want that gum back," which, don't get the gum back. The episode then turns to the Doctor Who weirdness where all the planes freeze in the sky, and Unit calls Clara. I mean, it sort of makes sense why Unit calls her, with her being the companion of the Doctor, the current one, but it's gotta be so weird for the students that Clara just is there, and then all of a sudden the teacher comes in and says, "Hey, the military wants your teacher. Is that okay?" "Oh, yeah, fine." Okay. But jumping ahead a bit, Clara sitting down with Missy to discuss things, and the confession tile is really good because Clara has been functioning as the Doctor's best friend. But when it comes to this kind of best friends, it's obviously going to be Missy, where it's handling the Doctor's last will and testament and Gallifrey stuff. It's always going to be Missy, but even given their status as being like mostly enemies, now the Doctor would obviously turn to her. But Clara, upon hearing, oh, it goes to your best friend, and she goes, ooh, I'll get that. Oh, why did it shock me? And Missy's like, I'm his best friend. It works. I love that beat. It makes sense for Clara. But then Clara's like shocked at not being the Doctor's best friend for the purposes of this. She's able to just move on really well. Or at minimum, she's just set it aside because she's figuring out what Missy's doing. And after they figure out where the Doctor is, they travel back in time to it, and then we get a bit that I still can't let go of the fact that Clara saw all of the Doctor's life, because Missy looks at Clara going, who's asking, what's the Doctor doing? He's never like this. And Clara says, and Missy goes, oh, you must be new. Clearly the writers have forgotten about this plot beat, but please, I can't forget it. Why? And the Doctor responds to their conversation of what's the Doctor doing by playing Pretty Woman. Excellent moment. But then after being captured by the Daleks, yeah, this first half is really all over the place. I skipped so much even before talking about this. But it's interesting to see that Clara is ending up in a Doctor-companion relationship with Missy, and Missy is weirdly open to explaining things, even with her own evil, chaotic twist, of course, but they get along together really well. It's weird, but I love it. And that's really all the notes I have for part 1. On to The Witch's Familiar. And in the recap, because this had a previously on segment, I forgot to write down something about Clara accurately reading the Doctor when they're talking. Like, the second she sees him back when he was driving a tank, she can tell he's ashamed about something. And we, the audience, know it's for how he responded to seeing young Davros and feeling like, oh, I have to save Davros before he becomes the creator of the most evil thing in the universe. Great. But she's able to read him so well and so quickly. But Clara's conversation with Missy, where Missy's explaining how the Doctor once managed to escape certain death, and Missy's able to guide Clara into figuring out how the Doctor managed to escape and learn how they escaped their certain deaths at the end of the last episode. But it's what Clara says about how the Doctor was able to improvise it with no thought and no planning. It's the reason why the Doctor can always escape within nanoseconds, is he's always certain he will escape. And it's this piece of advice from Missy that I would say is almost certainly the reason why Clara got herself killed in Face the Raven. Now, Missy bringing it up here is because the Doctor has set up his last will and testament and is clearly now operating under I will always survive mentality. Now, teaching this lesson for Clara to take on herself was clearly not Missy's intent, and I doubt Clara realized she was actually learning this lesson, but she did. She absolutely learned that lesson from this exercise. But they're all, again, not really in the episode much after this, so we jump to the end of the episode, where it's the Doctor facing Clara, who is now riding around in a Dalek, and their conversation is interesting. It's really fun to see Missy show up here and try to get the Doctor to be the one to kill Clara, purely for her own love of the bit. Now, this is also the series that was dealing with the hybrid. And I'll say I don't think that was a well-done plot thread. But looking at this season again as I'm going through it for this, I'm seeing some more threads with that. And like how after learning about the hybrid, we actually do get our first answer of that, where at least based on what the final answer is, because it ends with just everyone guessing what the hybrid is. And we do sort of see an answer played out. It's not told to us, we're shown it, where the Doctor threatens Missy by telling her to just run once he learns that she tried to get him to kill Clara. Excuse me. He's telling her, just leave me alone before, and you can tell it's before he does something he will regret, because Missy hurt Clara. And I still maintain that the telling of the hybrid story is bad, but this sort of hinting at the answer does work a bit. But then the same thing, when it comes to talking about Clara in this episode, she does get that scene at the beginning where she's learning from Missy that sets up Face the Raven, and after that she's basically just used by Missy for her own entertainment so that she can nearly die and set up the Doctor going off the rails to protect her. But yeah, she's very passive in this episode. She learned she's told something and figures it out based on obvious clues like... Yeah, this wasn't the best play out for Clara, but it did set up stuff with Face the Raven, so there's that. Under the Lake. Clara's first few minutes of this, she's very excited to be somewhere different. It's an interesting continuation of her character. I'm realizing she was kind of rebooted yet again for this season. It seems that each one of her 3 seasons, she's a slightly different character, which I have a little bit of a problem with, but I don't know. People do change, and she went through a lot of stuff last season, so it makes sense for her to change a bit. And throughout this season, we do see she is still splitting her time between traveling with the Doctor and living a real life. Sorry, I lost my place here. But in this season, she doesn't have the boyfriend and Danny to really drive that split into any kind of dramatic point. Like, the whole conflict between those two lives is a lot more toothless, and unless I am misremembering, there aren't as many interactions with her home life aside from the last 2-parter. Which, yeah, there is not. Last 2-parter, as in the previous ones, the Witches Familiar and Magicians something. You can tell I'm putting... Anyway. But Clara immediately stops the Doctor from being an idiot by getting him flashcards to better interact with the people at the base they're at. And this is pointing to I would describe, better, more palatable to me as an audience member view of their relationship, because this type of reaction from her is more like a mother scolding her misbehaving child type of reaction. But I also do appreciate her just being able to help the Doctor by going, don't ruin everything. Like, it works. It's a nice place for the two of them to be. But then when the world turns to night mode because they're at an underwater base, it switches at night and day based on code and light levels. The Doctor seems very surprised, and he's trying to correct Clara as she wants to go back out into the base and do things, but it's Clara's attitude about this that really fascinates me. She's just really casual and like, yeah, this is normal, this is how things should go. We should go out, do the thing, then come back and head on. There's not anxiety or fear or anything. It's just pure contentment with the job. Like, that is the best way I can phrase it. She was just so casual with it. It feels off, but it also makes sense. And as you'll see is a thing with the rest of the season, there's not really a ton to say about Clara's character here, aside from like a moment like that, because this episode's very plot heavy, which isn't a bad thing, it's just doesn't leave much room for Clara. On to Before the Flood. Now, quick thing, that's not actually about Clara. I'm trying to stick to her character as much as possible if I can help it, but the opening explanation of the bootstrap paradox in the Beethoven's Fifth version of the theme song is perfection. When we do first see Clara in this episode, she is staring at the ghost of the Doctor that has appeared, clearly lamenting over his inevitable demise, and she's calm, but also sad. And you see one of the members of the crew show up to ask her how to deal with these kind of situations, since she's clearly been involved in a few of them, and she's able to give some advice, which is helpful, but it's her reaction when she gets the Doctor on the phone and has informed him that he's a ghost in the time she's at, and he's like, oh well, had a good run, and she's upset, and she's upset to be losing this version of the Doctor, which makes sense. She has spent the most time with him and cared about him, but even more so than 11, which threw her through a loop, as we saw way back at the beginning of the 12th Doctor's time. But the Doctor just says, I can't change what's already happened. And I will say, it is weird that both he and Clara, in their own episodes, like here for the Doctor and in Face the Raven for Clara, they're very accepting of their own deaths, but it's the other of the two of them who is not accepting of it. It's just a really good contrast in showing how these two are so similar as Clara has grown. Much later in the episode, Clara is able to use her ingenuity to figure out a plan to get her phone back after it is stolen from one of the ghosts. It's ghosts who can interact with physical objects. It's great. You just need to have watched this episode for any of that to make sense. But yeah, it's a really clever plan she's able to come up with. She's, like I said, it's very... she's good. But then at the end of the episode, Clara is able to connect and bond with the guy whose girl he liked died and is already living with the regrets of not dating her now that their time is clearly over. And she doesn't mention Danny in this scene, but she's clearly able to use that memory to help them make a basic connection over this and help him out through it. It's really good. Like, it's a thing that doesn't need to be stated explicitly to the audience, but is clearly what's happening there. I like it. Onto The Girl Who Died. I talked about this in my Face the Raven review, but this episode starts with Clara in space with some sort of weird alien in her spacesuit, obviously ready to kill her, and she is scared and terrified up until the moment she is saved, and then she's immediately calm. Like, it's almost freaky the levels of normalcy with facing death she's having, especially when you consider just how used to it she clearly is. It's so weird. Clara tries to get more involved in helping things, but she's chained up after she and the Doctor were captured. Yeah, again, jumping ahead in the plot a bit. But she uses the broken half of the Sonic sunglasses to try and get the random woman, who's definitely not going to be important, to do it. And it works at the cost of being captured. But I like her ingenuity, even if her timing is just a little off. Clara goes talking to the fake Odin, watch the episode, and she's genuinely almost able to talk him out of battle. But then the very spirited young woman, played by Maisie Williams, is very eager for battle and honor, so Clara's plan, which almost succeeded, completely backfires and doesn't work. This is really good here because Clara's really good at doing these kind of big battle manipulation things, but this random citizen has grown up in the world of battle, so yeah, she was always going to try and do something like this. Something else I really like about And in the aftermath, when Clara gets back to the rest of the world, the closeness of the Doctor and Clara shows up in a really great beat, where the Doctor was simply completely confident that Clara would have been able to resolve the situation. He just didn't realize that Maisie Williams' character would do that. And after they're prepping for battle, there's a break in the, preparation for the inevitable battle. The Doctor and Clara have a very interesting conversation. And it's where the Doctor says, a good death is all you can hope for unless you're immortal. And Clara is surprised that his plan is battle. She thought for sure he would have another plan, and she pushes him to come up with a better plan. It's a really great connection and bit there where she's not even angry, she's just slightly nudging him. I love their connection, especially this season. Last season's was more dramatic, and here it's a lot more, like I said, that closeness of personality that works really well, especially when you consider Face the Raven. The ending is pretty good. After Ashildr, Maisie Williams' character, dies, Clara isn't as much of a focus in here. She's mostly a supporting role, which isn't bad. She's gotten a few good focus episodes, and the Doctor's equally as important. And let's be honest, the show is called Doctor Who, but Clara does a really good supporting role to bounce off of, and it helps drive the Doctor's focus to decide to help save Ashildr. Once again, a reminder, I just write these notes as I'm watching the episodes, and then I read them afterwards. So it sometimes comes across as random. But then, right at the end, as the Doctor is explaining that immortality is everybody else dying, and sometimes you might meet someone you can't bear to lose, he does this in a way that implies he couldn't bear to lose Clara. Which is true, as we will see later. But here he's done what he can. And then there's just some more talk about dumb hybrid stuff. I'm still not a fan of this arc. But again, because this ties... and I'm reiterating this point again from the Face the Raven review, which it's just... because, the ending shot where you just see Ashildr slowly turn into the character me, as you see the world go by and you see this youthful, hopeful optimism of early immortality slowly pan around as the world changes around her, and you come across a hardened, experienced, cynical outlook. And it's all written on her face. It's so wonderfully tragic. Again, I'm still doing that half review, mostly sticking to Clara thing. Can you tell this is the last clip before I've finished my prep work for the Heaven Sent Hellbent video? Anyway, onto The Woman Who Lived. I genuinely didn't think I would have any notes for this one. I did choose to watch the episode because, I didn't want to skip anything. But it is interesting that Me recognizes Clara as the Doctor's weakness. Because yes, she's correct, but this is based on one meeting that she had before she had the world-worn wisdom that comes from living forever. It's fascinating. It also, I think, is implying about that whole she heard about stuff because the Doctor makes waves thing that they talk about at the end of the episode. But right at the end, after the Doctor leaves Me and her time to live to the present, Clara shows up, and we basically just get reminders that she's still splitting her time between the TARDIS and a real life, and that she's definitely still a teacher, because she's showing the Doctor a picture with a student who's done good on a report, or something, it doesn't matter. But in the background, the Doctor can see Me, keeping an eye on him, clearly. And that's literally all Clara has in this episode. The Zygon Invasion. This is another one of those that is a bit complicated in terms of its politics, we'll go with. So we're going to stick to Clara as much as possible. But Clara is... We first come across her in the episode, and she's just being incredibly casual with the entire space traveling thing at this point, because she's apparently had her voicemail set to, if you can't catch me, I'm either on the tube or in space. Lovely. We actually finally physically see Clara in the episode when she essentially ignores the Doctor's 127 missed calls, which, to me, says that the Doctor abuses his phone privileges if she's able to brush off 127 missed calls. And right after that is the point where, having seen these episodes before and knowing them, makes it to where I don't make unneeded notes for this, because I know after Clara sees the kid in the stairs and then goes into the apartment to drop him off, and then we see Clara come out and tie her hair back. Like, I know that's not actually Clara. It's actually a Zygon. So most of the characterization of Clara that we see is not actually characterization of Clara, which is just great from a talking about Clara standpoint. So, yeah, we're just gonna skip most of this episode. But fake Clara being the one to explain, jumping ahead to when they're learning about the, phrase that all the Zygons are using, the rebel Zygons are using, truth or consequences. Fake Clara is the one to explain what truth or consequences is. And it's such an obvious tell in retrospect. I don't think I called this when I first saw the DVDs. But it's an obvious tell that this isn't Clara. Especially since Kate says, wait, isn't that the town Osgood was last seen in? Like, clearly Kate was supposed to figure it out on her own, and fake Clara's just going, oh, come on, just do it. Now, because there was so few notes to make about Clara, I just decided to Google something because the town name sounded fake. So I Googled it. And apparently it is a real city in New Mexico called Truth or Consequences. And in the episode, Clara claims it was named after a show, and yes, there was a radio show which became a television show hosted by Bob Barker, who went on to be the Price is Right guy. And no one remembers this show. Everyone always talks about The Price is Right, which, yeah, of course they do, but anyway. We then go to the Zygon Inversion. And we actually do get to see real Clara in this. We get this really interesting way of seeing what just stuck living inside Clara's head is. And I also really like how she's able to affect the Zygon a little. And her desperate need to do that works really well here. Her ability to recognize that she can affect the Zygon that's pretending to be her and have a little influence works. What doesn't work for me, though, is the fact that apparently no one else who's been replaced by a Zygon can influence them, or at least doesn't think to. I don't know. It's odd. I guess all the rest of them are panicking or something. We'll go with that. Now, I will say she doesn't actually stop Bonnie, that's the name for the Zygon, from shooting a missile launcher at the plane that the Doctor's on, but she still does have more influence than I would have guessed. And also, I know it's been a bit, but please pardon me for making another obsession reference when it comes to Clara, but is this what it was like for Nikki, except Clara's just not screaming the entire time? Like, she's trapped inside her own head, occasionally able to talk to the Zygon. It's... And again, later we see Clara again influencing the Zygon in ways that I think other people should be able to, where she's able to text the Doctor using Bonnie's hand. Okay, another bit of reviewing. Again, I try to avoid reviewing, but why was Clara asleep during episode 1? Was it just because the twist needed to exist for us, the audience? Like, we clearly are seeing Clara learn how to influence things right at the climax of episode 1. Like, what? But anyway, like I said, Clara and Bonnie do talk to each other, and that conversation is so great. It's so good to and Clara has that calm, cool, slightly arrogant demeanor, and it's very Doctor-esque, and it works really well and just points to how far she's progressing in becoming the Doctor in her own way. Now, again, jumping ahead most of the episode to the very end, with the Doctor telling Bonnie that what happened to her to cause her to stop her escalation of conflict between the Zygons and the humans was the same thing that happened to him during the episode The Day of the Doctor. No, he doesn't phrase it like that. And apparently it was letting Clara get inside your head. And just a quick follow-up to my comments about her with the War Doctor saying, if I'm half the man you are, Clara. Like, I'm not saying Clara is a bad character and isn't interesting, but she didn't do a ton in this episode. She had a really good standoff with Bonnie, and it was the Doctor's emphasis on his history that caused Bonnie to change. Why are you giving Clara that credit, man? It was your experience, dude. All right, on to Sleep No More. The Doctor and Clara's introduction here is really fun to their dynamic, where she's asking him, did you take me to a space restaurant? And the Doctor's going about how you can't just slap the word space in front of things because it has advanced technology, which is great. They have a fun dynamic. Like I said, it's a much better dynamic in this season than they had last season in terms of appropriateness. Now, this episode is weird and not my favorite, although I do applaud it for being experimental. With experimental stories, not all of them are going to work, and this one just doesn't work. But what I can say is that the Sand Eye creature is much better than the entirety of Space Babies, which I still would say isn't bad, it's just I can take this more seriously. Yeah, there was not many notes to make on this episode. But then when the Doctor figured out that the Morpheus process is the thing that is causing the weirdness and it's causing people's eyes to become cameras and for the found footage that we, the audience, are watching, Clara just immediately says, you can fix this, right? You can fix this. And it speaks to the mentality that came at the beginning of this season where she was told the Doctor can get out of any situation, which again makes sense and is a great setup for the next episode. And again, this is one of those this was genuinely my last note I wrote on this one, because this is just another. So yeah. Anyway, this is just another one of those episodes where Clara doesn't have much characterization. So I'm watching this thinking about the types of jokes I can make when I eventually review this episode. Like when it plays the Mr. Sandman song, I would just cut to Back to the Future when it plays that, because I only associate that song with that movie, and it's always weird whenever anyone else tries to use it, but that might just be me. Or for some reason when they kept saying Morpheus, like there's two references I can make. One is either The Matrix, or because I'm lazy and like I don't know, it sounded vaguely like the word Morbius, so I could make a Morbin time joke. That's still relevant, right? Like, Morbin time is still a thing, right? So, anyway, that's the end of my notes. So, that is every Clara episode before her death. And I wanted to say, it's really interesting to me, because in Series 7, she was very much a underwritten character. She was just an empty slate that you slotted someone into. And I still feel that in the episode Cold War, that was written for a generic companion and they never made it specialized to her. But then over the course of Day of the Doctor, and really once you get into Series 8, they have actually managed to define her character in ways that feels very different to the vagueness that existed in Series 7. And it really emphasized the aspects that are, like, really good negative aspects to her personality. Like, that even though they don't come up all the time, they're still there. Like, her need to control things and focus things really well. And just, like, she wants to do things on her own in ways that she defines it. Like, when she's out on dates with Danny and she's like, oh no, I need to fix this, let's time travel. Oh, I'm not wearing the same clothes, let's lie. Just lying to maintain things how she wants it is a really good, interesting character. But then, when you come to Series 9, like, it feels like the character has run her course. I don't feel like there's as much interesting being done with Clara in Series 9. And, like, because of that, there's just not as much interesting things to talk about with her. It's why I was able to get through this half so much faster, I feel like. I'm not checking the time codes on the video to confirm that, but it's like, okay, we just want to have her hang around, and it's still the same person a bit, but there's not any of that strong characterization that comes from the dynamics of actually diving into the idea of splitting your time between TARDIS and real life, for lack of a better term. It's all her real life, but normal life. But yeah, I just feel like she ran her course, and they just didn't have as much interesting things to do. So the episode just kind of stops around then. Or rather, the series just kind of is like, okay, I guess we've run out of things. Let's take this little thread we've had of her acting more doctorish, and we've kind of been leaning into that a bit more this season when we have characterized her. And let's just dive head first into it with Face the Raven. It really works for her, so yeah. Okay, so I just filmed the Heaven Sent and Hell Bent review, and I realized I can't make this video and call it every Clara episode and not actually talk about every Clara episode. So we're just going to briefly talk about the rest of the episodes from Series 9, even though I quite literally just made a review of 2 of them, and last time made a review of 1 of them. So let's talk briefly about... So I'm just going to go through I went through these episodes again, and I'm going to now give my Clara-specific analysis of her across these episodes. So, Face the Raven. We start with the Doctor and Clara ending a random adventure, rather. When the TARDIS gets a call from Clara's companion, I didn't even drink a soda while I was making the review. Why am I burping so much? Anyway, we start the episode with the Doctor and Clara ending a random adventure when the TARDIS gets a call from Clara's companion, Rigsy. And what's really interesting about this is the Doctor didn't know she gave out his number, which she gave to Rigsy for emergencies. And he calls it for an obvious emergency of the mysterious counting down number tattoo, which that's obviously a pretty good emergency. But something I didn't mention enough in the original video is that during the scene when Clara is hanging out outside of the TARDIS, just using her legs to stay out as they're flying over everything, trying to look for the trap street, is that Rigsy recognizes that she shouldn't have enjoyed that near-death experience, and the Doctor agrees, but neither of them does a thing. It is interesting that the Doctor acknowledges that it's not good, but also he doesn't do anything to stop it. But when Clara, later, when Clara is taking the tattoo from Riggsy in the review, I missed the bit where she specifically called out that she is specifically trying to emulate the Doctor by saying, "This is Doctor 101. Confuse the enemy and keep them on their toes." She seems to think that this is them buying more time. I guess she thinks the time resets, possibly, but later she acts like it's going on. I didn't really give that the full look at the time. Again, just last few episodes. Something else I missed in the review, not about Clara, but it is really telling, that when the Doctor is going around asking for evidence of someone else doing the murder, it becomes really clear that at least some of the citizens that he's talking to are willing to let Riggsy face death, even if the possibility exists for it to not be true, because if it's not, then that means one of them did it, and if one of them did it, their society collapses. And everyone's going to turn on each other, and they're willing to live with a lie if it means that society stays right where it is. Which doesn't feel relevant right now at all. Clara is truly defiant and arrogant when she's revealing that she's taken on the tattoo, but because she thinks she can get out of death. She is explicitly trying to be the Doctor, but then as she repeats the words that she was told about how you can't give it up, but you can pass it along, and she realizes what those actually mean, that she can't give it up, she immediately turns to the Doctor, and you can tell from her voice that she knows she can't actually escape her death, but she does try, which does make sense, but she knows it's too late. We then see the start of the Doctor's rage that he has in Heaven Sent, where he is very quickly well on his way to having a murderous rage. But once Clara realizes what's happening, she tries to make the best she can by trying to calm the Doctor down and having a good final moment with him. I do appreciate that she tries to get final confirmation from me and is surprisingly willing to accept that me can't do anything to stop it. It's possible she's just deluding herself, but she starts reassuring that maybe this is what she wanted. But she also acknowledges she was trying to be like the Doctor. And I really love the Doctor's response, which I should have mentioned in the review, which is, "I'm less breakable than you." The Doctor's other lives he views as existing to help save his companions, but he can't do that here. Which really works and ties in well with the other stuff we've been talking about with Heaven Sent and Hellbent. It's really reflective of his character. And it also comes across as Clara really caring about her friend, because she goes to the Doctor and tells him, "You're going to be alone. You can't handle that. You're going to be very angry, but please don't." And it's after this that she goes to face her death with bravery. And in that she chooses not to run. She simply allows it to happen because there's nothing she can do. And after having rewatched all of her episodes, I now feel really confident in saying that I still stand by the fact that this was a really effective death for her. But I'm also going to say this would have been even more effective if it was done in Series 8. I think Series 8 is peak Clara characterization. She has a lot more interesting things to do over the course of the series, and in Series 9 she very much fell into sort of a background companion. It felt a lot more like a classic era companion, if I'm being completely honest about it, in terms of, it's not like that the classic companions are bad, it's just that they're not as narratively interesting or as important as they are in the modern series. Now, in both the Face the Raven review and the Heaven Sent Hellbent video, I held off making this joke, but for this kind of analysis, I'll go ahead and make the joke and say that there is a running joke amongst the fandom about how little the Doctor cared about Adric's death, and how it was just ignored. But here we got multiple episodes following Clara's death and dealing with her death. And I feel like if she only had this series, like Series 9 was her only series, I don't think it would have worked. But with Series 8, it does. But the thing is, in Series 9, this episode, Face the Raven, is her only focus episode. She is a background element most of the time. She's still playing the same character, but there's not as much narratively that is unique about her. Anyways, after Clara dies, the Doctor points out to me that when Clara told him not to take revenge, she was explicitly saving me, not the Doctor. And his brimming rage works so well because he's honoring Clara's wish, but it's very clear he will not let this go, which is the perfect setup for Heaven Sent. I'm now going to read my exact notes on Heaven Sent, word for word. I'm sorry, but I rewatched this episode already in preparation for the main video, and the actual genuine Clara is not in this. It is explicitly the imagination Clara, and I am running out of time. I am watching the previous episode, and all the episodes for this clip, the Face the Raven, the Hellbent, and then I'm even going to be watching a bit from Twice Upon a Time, all in one night, the night before I film the full video, and I have other projects to work on. So I'm simply going to skip Heaven Sent again, which I'm sorry, but the main video for this, where I talk about this episode, came out last week. Go watch it. Yeah, I did the sacrilege thing again. I'm sorry. So, let's move on to Hellbent. Again, I'm sorry, I'm running out of time, and I need to get this done so I can move to other videos. My time is limited. I'm doing what I can. Now, I stand by what I said in the main review, which is, aside from the opening with the flash forward that takes place after the bulk of the episode, Hellbent plays a lot better if you watch it directly after Face the Raven, which is still so wrong for such a good episode to improve another episode by not existing. That shouldn't be a thing. Okay, I'm going to take a minute aside in this video that normally I only try to talk about Clara, to talk about something that I didn't have time to talk about in the main video, but this video is already over 3 hours long, so I don't care about going off topic at this point. What did the Sisterhood of Karn have to do with this episode at all? Like, I completely skipped them in the main video because they didn't matter, but seriously, what was the point in them? I like them, I like the leader here, but again, this episode is just a dumping ground for other episodes' ideas, and it just exists for padding. But again, this whole thing is better with coming right after Face the Raven. The Doctor's rage here truly feels like he just arrived after being teleported in Face the Raven, and he's just threatened me to stay out of his way. It doesn't feel like he's spent what was framed within Heaven Sent as potentially at least a few weeks inside of the confession dial. That's like what his actual memory of time would be in the confession dial. But the pain still looks raw. But if you're still this murderously angry after weeks, it feels off. And I think that's another thing that gets Hellbent feeling more off if you watch it with Heaven Sent. It feels like they told Capaldi to play it as if he hadn't experienced Heaven Sent, but they forgot that the Doctor had experienced it at least once. Also, I should have again talked about it in the main video, but his costume in Heaven Sent was so good. The red velvet, the really sharp collars just work so well there. And his costume in Hellbent is just so much worse. It's just not as sharp or interesting looking. Oh man, I forgot to put this bit. I'll retrofit it. Okay, I wrote down here, I forgot if I put this bit in the episode. I put in another bit, but I forgot this one. Okay, let's film another bit for that. It'll be in both videos now. So, let me get a drink of water. Okay, main video energy. This is just going to be improvised. So when Rassilon arrives to try and tell the Doctor off and tells him, no, you have to do what we say, he turns to a bunch of his guards and says, kill the Doctor. And here's how that goes. Yeah, that's the whole bit. It's just going to be a hard cut from the actual episode clip where it shows them shooting to that Whitest Kids You Know sketch where none of the assassins are willing to kill the guy. And Trevor Moore turns and says, no, you have to aim. It's so stupid, but terrifyingly, right after I wrote that down last night, I saw that they uploaded an HD version of that. Those clips still look so wrong in HD. It should be at the crappiest quality possible. But yeah, the whole bit there, it's not even that dramatic really, but it just, like I said, it just plays like a Whitest Kids You Know sketch. The Whitest Kids You Know! Anyway, what's interesting is with the framing device of this episode, we see Clara learning about the opening events where the Doctor is telling off Rassilon and getting all the soldiers to join his side, and we see Clara learn about these events because she was not present for them, so here is her genuine first time learning about them. And the story does not provide, because the rest of the story does not provide an opportunity for her to learn about them. Plus, I doubt the Doctor would have told her. There's no point in this when Clara joins that she would have learned about this. So it's just kind of interesting that she's learning about this, and you can tell that she's learning about it from the way Jenna Coleman plays it. It's just an interesting point, especially because the Doctor isn't actually telling about aliens. He's just saying that he was up against a gang back home in Glasgow. I don't know how he explained the memory wipe thing while keeping it all human scale, but he didn't need to lie because it was actually Clara and she's been to Gallifrey and other places. But again, I still don't like how the Doctor brought Clara back. But what I do like is how, when it's done, you hear this ringing in your ears sound, which makes sense since Clara is not hearing her own heartbeat for the first time. It's a really good way to get you inside of Clara's head and realizing that everything about this is wrong. But she's very quickly able to realize she's on Gallifrey now. And when Clara realizes that the Doctor is truly breaking the rules, she tries to help fix it in some way, but she doesn't know what to do, but then the Doctor kills the General. And when the Doctor and Clara are in the cloisters, there's this nice little bit where they meet a Dalek, and you hear it saying exterminate really slowly. I don't know if this was a purposeful reference to Jenna Coleman's first appearance as Oswin, where it ended with Oswin revealing to be a Dalek going, eggs, stir, Nate. It's a really nice reference if that was intentional. But while waiting in the catacombs for the Doctor to figure out how to get out of the secret exit that they know about, Clara is able to very easily figure out that it has been a long time for the Doctor since he last saw her. He tries to dodge the question of exactly how long. He just says a long time, which doesn't give away how the fact that it's been billions of years. But he does explain a little bit of it, where he's talking about the 20 feet of pure diamond. But with enough time, you can get out. Like, that's a close to direct quote from what he explains to her. But when the General tells Clara the answer, Clara is understandably shocked at learning just how long the Doctor was in the confession dial. She clearly didn't think the Doctor should have done it, and as the Doctor just tries to move on from this fact and just do Doctor things, she can't believe that he's doing that. So Clara says, let me just talk with her. And, sorry, I jumped ahead. But as Clara is talking with the Doctor, she's saying, no, my time was up. It's over. You didn't have to go through any of this. Which, yeah, is the correct reaction to finding out your friends spent billions of years trying to bring you back to life. Like, wow. But after that, she says, let's just talk for a minute. And then the camera pans up and we see the outside of Gallifrey, and we see them have a sincere moment discussing these very important topics that should be discussed. Too bad it's a narrative rug pull. Immediately after this, we get a scene that implies a lot of time passes. Maybe they talked about these important issues, but the main thing they talked about, based on what we see later, is just Clara giving a plan for them to be able to sneak out. And she goes, sneak out while I talk with them. They won't pay attention to you. And then we can escape, which of course works, and that's how the TARDIS is stolen. But the thing is, this moment undermines the entire point of the scene before it. Clara's horror and realizing that the Doctor spent 4.5 billion years in the confession dial that should have been a beat that gets more conversation, and the episode pretty much just moves on, forgetting about this conversation. I rearranged my feet and kicked it, and I'm not picking him up. And then I wrote in a bit that I actually, just last night when I was writing this, added back into the review. The bit where I'm talking about how me is wiser than the Doctor. Sometimes stuff gets added very late with these videos. So I'm just going to skip over all those notes because I read most of them a little bit ago, or last week, whatever your perspective of time is, because it's both. But it's at this point, when the Doctor is talking with me, where she pauses and she puts out the possibility that the hybrid is the Doctor in combination with Clara that is the hybrid. And he somewhat sarcastically says, yes, I know, I went too far. It doesn't feel authentic. But the Doctor then explains his plan to erase Clara's memory and then leave her somewhere safe and away. Me points out that she might not want that. And something I can't avoid mentioning, 47 minutes into this episode is the first time that, like, for 47 minutes, up until this point, my Blu-ray player says what time code we're at, but Clara doesn't actually matter narratively. We had that beat I mentioned earlier where she's horrified, but like I said, the episode moves on. This is the first point in the story when Clara's autonomy is brought up. And it's mentioned that, hey, have you considered what she wants? Which from one perspective does work because the episode is very much about the Doctor, but Clara's a much better character to get that part of her ignored for 47 minutes. Like I said, she doesn't have much agency. She doesn't have much going on, but then in the last 10 minutes, She does get some autonomy, and it is pretty good here, but the entire episode is about the Doctor's refusal to let her stay dead, and she has made some reference to being okay with her death, and thinking the Doctor has gone too far, but then he just ignores her and keeps going. And then Clara tells the Doctor what she did with the memory erasing thing and explains that she needs her past, her yesterdays. Those are hers. She can't get them taken away. And this is seemingly what causes the Doctor to realize he went too far. And I want to be clear again. Clara is finally getting some agency in this episode, and that is good. But this still feels like the murder should have been the thing that causes the Doctor to realize he went too far, but at least it was something. Do I? Okay, No, I'm just gonna clip that and drop it in, I think. Yeah. But then the Doctor just says, okay, there's a chance your thing worked. There's also a chance it didn't. It's a 50-50 chance. Let's both see what happens. And honestly, it works. Narratively at this point, finally. And this shows just how connected they are. Because Clara is able to do a very Doctor plan at this moment in a much safer capacity than what she did last time she tried. But then Clara immediately seems to regret that the Doctor has to lose his memory, and doesn't like that he's approaching this by saying goodbye. And it feels like this thing of, even though you know the Doctor has to say goodbye, and that one of them has to lose their memories because it's all gone too far, you don't actually want it to happen, and it's played really well. But it's at this point, when the Doctor loses his memory, that he's able to finally acknowledge, truthfully, that he went too far and became the hybrid, even just temporarily. And I kind of like how Clara is here. She's clearly sad to see the Doctor go, and doesn't want to, but also just can't say goodbye. This is taking place back in the diner. But she doesn't want to go, and she just can't say goodbye emotionally in this moment. And it works, even just as an overall structure thing. I don't know what I was writing. The fact that she can't even say goodbye to the Doctor here works. I still stand by, this isn't the best ending she got. Any of her other potential endings would have been better. It's the best kind of bad ending, where it feels emotionally right, even if you feel like it shouldn't end this way. But then me and Clara's relationship is really interesting, because Clara is fully aware that like a few hours ago her death occurred indirectly because of me. But this does fit with her character. She's just recognizing, hey, we have some wiggle room before I have to go back. We can just go out and do things and it'll be fine. I do find it really interesting that me, who was in one of the earlier episodes, like in an earlier episode that I still didn't talk about in this episode, in this review, because there was so much, but when she first met up with the Doctor after her first time aging, like living through things rather, she wanted to travel in the TARDIS, and now she's finally able to after having lived through the entirety of the universe. But the episode doesn't really point that out. Nothing, like, she's a tertiary character in this episode, so I get why it doesn't get the focus, but I wanted to point it out. Twice Upon a Time, Capaldi's last, along with Clara's last. Wow, I have been filming for too long. It is 10 o'clock at night and I have work tomorrow. Now again, as is clear from what I just said, I'm making this at a crunch, so I don't have time to watch the episode in its entirety, because Clara's not in it much, and she's been gone for a whole season at this point, so just give me this out. So skipping ahead to one of the final scenes where the Doctor gets a chance to see all of his companions. I admit, as I was taking notes here, maybe I would have benefited from watching the whole episode, but I don't have time. Because we see Bill, the companion from Series 10, saying she might not physically be the real Bill, but she is all of her memories. And then she says, let me prove how important memories are. And then it's implied she turns into Clara, who says, Merry Christmas. And then the Doctor has his memory again. And she says, don't forget me again. And the Doctor is seemingly able to accept what's going on. He's just finally happy to be able to remember. He's just happy to finally be able to remember her again. It works. But yeah, that really is it. The complete and total analysis of Clara on every single one of her episodes. Thank you so much for watching. I knew this was going to be a big project, but it turned out so much bigger than I anticipated, but I'm glad to have done it because this was a really great and fascinating way to watch the show. I had never sat down to watch every single episode a character had appeared in, specifically looking at how that character grew and changed. And I feel like I have a much better grasp on Clara as a character, and how she changed season to season, and how she adapted as things went on. And even if this video does not do well for me, this was exceedingly worth it for me. So, yeah. Thank you for watching. And it was about 20 minutes after I wrote that conclusion that I remembered minisodes are a thing. Can we just pretend those don't exist?